My parents and golden child sister ditched me on my 15th birthday, so I threw a fake party with their work friends and exposed the truth. I celebrated my 15th birthday 3 days ago, but things didn't go as expected. On the morning of my birthday, my parents enthusiastically informed me that they had planned a surprise family trip to the Poconos. I was ecstatic since, as the less important younger sibling, I rarely get surprises like this. I was quite happy. However, a few hours later, when I finished packing and walked downstairs with my bags, I discovered that my parents had already left. Only my older sister, Alex, 17F, the golden child, was there for me. She smiled, so I knew something was wrong. When I questioned what was going on, she said I didn't need to pack my things and could go back upstairs to unpack. I assumed the trip had been canceled, but she informed me that there would be no family vacation for me and handed me a sheet of paper with a list of responsibilities. I was perplexed until she stated that my parents and she had agreed that, despite the fact that they had surprised me with the vacation that morning, they had a debate, and Alex believed it would be best for me to stay home and study because our finals were approaching. She, of course, got to leave because she had completed her assignments. If I became bored, I could do household tasks. Then she chuckled and said I should thank her for giving me time to study rather than spending it with our family. I was so wounded that all I could do was inquire where our parents were. Alex informed me that she had already dispatched them to the airport and had stayed behind to tell me in person as a birthday gift to me. She explained that my parents couldn't bring themselves to break my heart, so they let Alex give the news, which she obviously loved. I knew she enjoyed embarrassing me. I returned upstairs with my things, resisting the impulse to cry in front of her. After hearing the front door close, I broke down and cried for an hour. Alex had always despised me and I knew my parents would always support her. But I never expected them to be so harsh, particularly on my birthday. After I cooled down, I became enraged. I had texted my pals earlier, explaining that I couldn't hang out due to the trip and now I was trapped at home alone. So I decided to get revenge at my folks and Alex. I went to my father's office and used his MacBook to discover essential contacts. I called everyone and invited them to a surprise anniversary party for my parents that evening. Because I was only a child, the majority of them agreed to attend, thinking it was charming. I did the same for my mother's contacts, and because neither of them had password-protected devices, it was simple. Then I decided to text Alex's boyfriend on Instagram, inviting him to the party that evening. I also invited my own friends and had them help me decorate the house to make it look like a party. Around 7 p.m., the visitors I had invited began to arrive, but they were surprised to see that my parents were not present. I kept telling them it was a surprise and they'd find out what was going on later. After all of the guests had come and we had taken a group shot, I decided to carry out my plan. I informed the guests where my parents were and how they treated me. I explained how my parents always did everything Alex said and how I was treated like Cinderella. I had never discussed any of this before that day. I told how my parents had abandoned me on my birthday, without even trying to explain in person, since Alex thought it was the appropriate thing to do. Many people were startled because my parents presented themselves as lovely and decent. However, respectable people do not do this to their children. After I completed telling my narrative, I explained that this was exactly why I organized the party, to expose my parents and sister. Finally, I showed them the chore list Alex had left for me. I could see Alex's boyfriend standing in the corner, stunned, because he had no realized Alex had such a vicious side. Everyone was silent following my remarks. People eventually began to leave, some without saying anything, while others approached me to console me before leaving. The only thing I felt guilty about was wasting their time, but I was not too concerned. After everyone left, I texted the group photo to my parents and Alex with the following caption: "Had some people over for my birthday party today. I believe I'll start with the list Alex left me." It was a fantastic strategy. My parents reacted quickly after I sent the message, insisting that I solve everything right away and informing me that they would be returning on the next aircraft. I blocked them all and went to my closest friend Fiona's house with my belongings, knowing that my home was no longer mine. Fiona and her parents were lovely people who always said their doors were open. So I decided to take them up on their offer. I had no idea how long they could sustain me, but I was pleased they opened their home so generously. On my birthday, I did not hear from my parents. But the next day, they went to Fiona's place. Nobody was shocked that I had decided to stay with Fiona, as we had been best friends since childhood. When they arrived, Fiona's parents refused to let them in, claiming they had no business trying to talk to me after I'd made it obvious I was not interested. However, my parents began to threaten legal action against Fiona's parents. I was afraid, so I told them to invite my folks in and I'd be ready to chat. My folks were infuriated. They said I had no right to contact their business associates because their reputation was already tarnished. None of their co-workers or associates were ready to speak with them anymore, and some had even blocked my mother and father. They blamed me for this, which was understandable given that I planned the entire operation. I informed them that if they had been kind and not insulted me on my birthday, I would not have done this. I ended up yelling at them for always treating me worse than Alex, saying to them they had ruined my life and that I would never forgive them. Things became quite hot, and we were all yelling at each other so fiercely that Fiona's parents had to intercede. Fiona had to take me out of the room to help me calm down. When I finally calmed down, her parents approached me and told me that my parents had departed. They also told me that my parents would not be able to speak with me until I was ready to face them. Then Fiona's parents advised me to pursue legal action, such as emancipation, because it had become evident that my parents couldn't care less about me. They felt it was time I cut them out of my life for good. After discussing this with Fiona's parents, I decided to consult a lawyer, and we are currently considering emancipation. I'm still perplexed because this is a big decision, and I don't want to regret it in the future. However, at the current rate, I doubt I will. Yesterday, my parents contacted me again about my choice. Last evening, I received an email from my parents, which I recognized based on the address. I tried hard not to open it, but curiosity got the best of me and I read it. They began by saying that the reason they surprised me with the vacation was that one of my father's clients had opened a new spa and resort in the Poconos, which was a bonus for my father. He had chosen to seize the opportunity around the same time as my birthday. However, when Alex mentioned my exams, they didn't want my grades to suffer simply because I went on vacation with them. They couldn't believe I had misinterpreted the situation and attempted to get revenge on them for it. They stated it made them feel like they had failed to raise me properly. According to them, Alex was simply attempting to be a nice, caring big sister, and there was no reason for me to overreact. It was all rubbish, and I was quite irritated. I almost gave up reading halfway through, but the second portion was about how furious they were that I had included others in our family drama and aired our dirty laundry in public. They stated that they never expected or wanted this to happen. They said that if I had just spoken to them directly about my concerns, they might have been able to resolve them. Instead, I took such harsh measures. They conceded that Alex's list of responsibilities was excessive, but they stated I should have called and questioned them about it. They said that if they had known I felt excluded, they would have returned right away. They insisted that the manner I handled the matter was unexpected, and they felt awful about it. They said that it was an unfortunate mistake that had been blown out of control. They want me to talk to them and work things out, but I'm not sure what I want to do. I have extremely mixed thoughts about this. Please help me. Am I the jerk for holding a party and exposing my parents to their co-workers and business associates after they ignored me while on vacation? Update 1. Okay, so most of you believe that what I did was perfectly acceptable and that they deserved it, therefore I have nothing to apologize for. I've decided not to apologize. I disabled the email address they used to contact me, so they couldn't reach me again. I know they may build a new one and try to contact me, but I'll just continue to block them. I've decided that regardless of what they say, I will not answer or even read it. It's simply not worth it, it will only exacerbate my problems. As for emancipation, I've chosen to go for it. It's a big deal, and I know I'm still young, but Fiona and her parents have guaranteed me that they'll be by my side no matter what happens. They even offered to formally adopt me if it would make me feel more comfortable, which it could, but I haven't considered it yet. We're now simply working on emancipation, and the paperwork is being completed as we speak. I'm not sure how my parents will respond, because when they wrote me the email, I could tell they were unhappy that I'd chosen to live with Fiona and her parents. This makes little sense to me because, based on how I've been treated throughout my life, it's clear that they don't want me around as much as they want Alex. That is evident to me, but they are still attempting to reach out, which is perplexing. I have a feeling they only want me back to improve their reputation and image, nothing else. Right now all I can do is wait for them to receive the emancipation paperwork and see how they respond. It's been a few days since my post, and they haven't contacted me again after that email, so I'm not sure how they're feeling right now. I know things can't be going well for them because many people attended the party, and I've heard from others that Alex and her boyfriend split up. No one knows why, but me. Update 2. My parents received the documentation for my formal emancipation a few days ago, and they were not pleased, which surprised me. They phoned Fiona's parents, and there was a heated argument. Apparently, my parents assumed Fiona's family had set me up and were controlling me, believing I wasn't acting on my own free will. This didn't make sense to me. Do they know how terribly they've treated me in the past? Of course, I am doing this on my own accord. I had anticipated this type of reaction following my previous post, as many of you pointed out that they merely wanted me back to maintain their image as a happy family. They probably assumed everything I said during the party was simply me being bratty. When I didn't return to them, it enraged them because I was finally standing up for myself, and they couldn't take it. Unfortunately, this is already happening. They can call Fiona's parents whatever they want, but it won't change the fact that they deserve it, and they no longer deserve to be my parents. Fiona told me that my parents called her parents every term in the book and threatened to take them to court, stating they had no right to subject me to this. They also threatened to injure them, which is ridiculous because it is prohibited and will just make them appear worse. The way they spoke to Fiona's parents only confirmed what I already knew. They don't want me back out of love, but rather to improve their image. Fiona's parents were accused of attempting to destroy my parents' reputation by portraying themselves as saviors and revealing to the world that I had been abused. My parents vowed that they would not let that happen. They complained about how I was an entitled brat and that by supporting me, Fiona's parents were demonstrating that they were unsuitable to be parents themselves. If my parents truly loved me as a daughter, they would be more concerned about my well-being and would make an effort to communicate with me directly. Instead, they're shrieking at Fiona's parents, saying that they're trying to ruin their reputation. The thought that Fiona's parents would wish to ruin my parents is absurd. They only know each other through Fiona and me, so they have no motivation to compete. Furthermore, there's no comparison. Fiona's parents are far more prosperous, caring and sympathetic. My parents are so anxious about their image that they believe Fiona's parents are like them, incapable of actually caring for me and simply out to pull them down. I urgently want to inform my parents that Fiona's family isn't just pretending to be my saviors, they actually are. I needed to be saved from my parents. And if they had just realized it in the first place, they would have apologized for what they had done rather than attempting to create even more drama. But Fiona and her parents have given me specific instructions not to contact them, no matter how tempted I am, since it isn't worth it. I know they received the phone call from my parents a few days ago, and after arguing with them over the phone and giving me only the information they believed was vital for me to know, they informed me that they had recorded the call. My parents were extremely ignorant since this tape may be used as proof of why I deserve to be freed from them. They also asked me to consider whether I wanted them to legally adopt me or not. I ended up saying yes because I truly like them. And I know it will irritate my parents even more, but that isn't the major reason. It's largely because I believe they are really kind-hearted and great people, and having Fiona as my sister will be a bonus. So I'm totally in. They informed me that they will speak with the lawyer again to begin the paperwork for that as well, as it may help with my emancipation case, knowing that I have better people to depend on and live with. To be honest, this is only getting better, and I am very grateful to them. Update 3. Hello, something terrible occurred today. Long story short, Alex beat the snot out of me after school. My last class, English, was conducted in the east wing of the school, and as I was leaving, she and a group of her pals literally cornered me. Unfortunately, I am always the last person to leave class since I am slow at gathering my belongings, and by the time I exited, most of the students had already left. When I saw Alex and her pals standing outside, I was a little afraid, but I didn't show it because it would only help them win. As I was about to leave the classroom, they came all up in my face and told me I couldn't leave. They forced everyone else in the class to leave and informed me that they needed to settle some scores with me. I tried to remain calm and level-headed so that my worry did not show, but they did not appear to care. Alex grabbed my arm and walked me outside while I begged at her to let me go, but everyone else was so noisy that I couldn't be heard. Then they carried me to the janitor's closet and forced me inside. I kept knocking on the door, but they stood outside, and even if someone heard me, they wouldn't dare to intervene because Alex and her pals are seniors with a bad reputation. After approximately 5 minutes, Alex let me out. But by then, practically everyone had left, leaving me alone with them. When the first smack landed on my face, Alex began yelling at me. She described me as selfish and ungrateful to our parents. Then came the real reason she was so angry. She accused me of being the reason her boyfriend broke up with her. She banged my head into the concrete, and I became disoriented. She took advantage of this by repeatedly hammering me with her fists while her buddies laughed. It was terribly painful, and I attempted to defend myself, but Alex is several inches taller and considerably heavier, so there wasn't much I could do. At one point, I just cowered against the wall, and she kept beating me. When she was finished, she kicked me one more time before leaving with her buddies while I wailed against the wall. About 15 minutes later, Fiona discovered me sitting on the floor, crying profusely. When I informed her what had happened, she helped me get up, and instead of walking home, we grabbed a cab because I was in no shape to walk. When we came home we told her parents everything and they looked glum. They quickly contacted the school, followed by the police. It's barely been an hour and they've spent the entire time on the phone, but Fiona is taking care of me. I'm fairly bruised up, the bruises are just beginning to show and everything hurts. But I know Alex will receive her karma for this and it will come soon. Update 4. Hello, I have a lot of things to say, but I will try to make it short and sweet. Alex banged me up last week, but happily, the school stood up for me. They shared security footage from that part of the building with the police, making it simple to charge her with a misdemeanor. She received community work to compensate for it, but the best part was that she was suspended for the following 6 weeks. That means she won't be able to attend prom, which she was really looking forward to. She will also be seated separately for her finals, rather than with the rest of her class, which means she will be unable to scam her way out of them. I believe it is well deserved, and I felt vindicated when Fiona informed me about it all. Another wonderful thing that happened was that, following the disaster with Alex, my parents chose to relinquish their rights to me. That's correct, they have terminated their parental rights, and the paperwork has been signed. So I'm finally free, and Fiona's parents are about to legally adopt me. I'm really grateful to them for it. My parents told me that after everything that had happened, they no longer wanted me in their family. I know they'll attempt to make it appear that I'm at fault, but I don't think anyone will believe them. It makes no difference to me if they give it their all. To be honest, I am finally part of a happy family. I can assure you that my new sister and parents will be considerably superior to those I had previously. I can't believe it's finally working out for me. This is possibly the happiest I have felt in a long time. I even forgot about my upcoming finals, but Fiona and I are going to crack on and show everyone what I'm made of. My mom married a younger guy and wanted him to walk me down the aisle instead of my dad. When I said no, she skipped my wedding. Hello everyone, so I had a terrible disagreement with my mom a few days ago, on the day of my wedding, or rather, after everything was done. It was entirely her fault, but I recently spoke with my grandmother and unwittingly made matters worse for her. That is why I have begun to question whether what I did was justified or not. I'm 24F and have been with my partner, 24M, for the past 10 years. We began dating in high school, and he is the love of my life. So this wedding was a big event for me. We got engaged last year and spent months trying to make it an experience that everyone would remember. He and I had saved a lot of money to pay for it, but my mother was unconcerned. My parents split when I was 6 years old, and they have been co-parenting me ever then. They never got along, and I honestly don't know how they managed to stay married for so long. They were married for about 3 years before I was born and were together for another 6 years before splitting up. Most children are upset when their parents tell them they are getting divorced, but when they explained it to me, I was ecstatic. For me, it meant they wouldn't have to fight every day, and if they were happy, I might finally have a chance to be happy as well. As a child, I was satisfied with their decision, and they shared custody of me. I'd spend half the month at my father's house and the other half at my mother's. Unfortunately, I rejoiced too soon. I didn't understand that even in a co-parenting arrangement, they'd have to communicate with each other and reach an agreement on issues concerning me. They struggled even with that. They were continually bad-mouthing each other in front of me, making me feel caught in the crossfire. Both believed the other was out to make things tough for them, and I tried to be understanding as a child. But by middle school, I'd had enough. While staying with my father, he got into a disagreement with my mother because she wanted to rearrange the schedule to accommodate an event, which he did not agree with. I began to feel like a burden for both of them. That night, I packed a few belongings and went away. I was just 12. I walked to the bus stop, but because there was a scary person there, I retreated to a park near my house and decided to go to the bus station in the morning. Fortunately, I fell asleep in the park, and nothing happened to me. By daybreak, my father had recognized I was missing and called the cops. I was taken home safely. When my parents realized I had ran away, they confronted me about my situation. I told them they made me feel like a burden since they were constantly arguing over me. That's when they agreed to be better to one another for my sake. They had no idea I'd take such drastic measures in response to their behavior. After that, my father stuck to his word. Even when he battled with my mother, he didn't tell me about it so I didn't feel bad. My mother, on the other hand, would periodically forget and yell at me about my father. It made things difficult because I genuinely loved both of my parents. Neither were villains, they simply couldn't get along, making parenting difficult for them. It's difficult to raise a child when you dislike each other, but my father made an effort. My mother, on the other hand, did not take her vow very seriously. Eventually, I became closer to my father. Instead, I would spend time with her when I visited her on her turn to have me, and we would have a good time together. So I didn't love her any less, but I felt closer to my father. After I grew up and departed for college, my father maintained in touch with me more than my mother. So right now, I would certainly declare that I favor my father over my mother. However, I have always treated them with equal love and respect. What happened recently was simply too entitled for me to handle, so I ended up hitting out at her. My parents dated other individuals following their divorce, and my father decided to marry again around 4 years ago. He had been dating my stepmother for over 3 years by that point, and their relationship was serious, so it made sense for him to marry again. Prior to that, he had only had a couple of relationships that went nowhere. My mother, however, took a slightly different approach. She would only have flings after the divorce and would not commit to anyone, even if the other guy was interested. I'm not judging her. That's her decision, and I respect it. But then she contacted me unexpectedly around 6 months ago and informed me she had been seeing a guy for a few months and the two of them had decided to marry. She wanted me to be present for the wedding. I had no idea what was going on because everything happened so quickly and unexpectedly. But she told me she was confident in this person, and he appeared to be confident in her as well. She had a good time for many years, but now she wished someone would be there for her. Her husband, James, false name, had just been with my mother for 4 months when they married, and they appeared to be in love. But I was apprehensive about their bond. For starters, he was about a decade younger than her. Furthermore, they had only known one other for a short period of time. James had proposed they marry, and my mother had mentioned it often at the ceremony. But I don't think she realized that wasn't the circumstance she expected, because it only made things appear more suspicious. I tried to talk to her about it, but she dismissed me and said she was certain of her decision. So I didn't explore it further since I didn't want to come out as judgmental. For what it's worth, he seemed to be into her. So I went to the wedding, along with a handful of her close friends and relatives. I even wished them the best. When I informed my father about all of this, he was startled that she had married someone she had only known for a few months. But by then it had already been completed. After that, I was too preoccupied with preparing my own wedding to worry about what was going on with my mother and James, who appeared content enough. They've been married for 6 months, and I haven't seen her much because she spends all of her time traveling with him. She didn't even come to my bridal shower, but I had no complaints. However, the night before my wedding, while we were all at the hotel, she knocked on my door and informed me that she had something extremely important to talk about with me. So I allowed her inside. That's when she decided to inform me that she overheard me talking to my father about leading me down the aisle, and she assumed I'd asked James to do it. At the rehearsal supper, she expected me to ask James, but I didn't. Even though I had previously asked her, I decided to have both of my parents follow me down the aisle since I felt it would be more appropriate for my family dynamics. I did not want my mother to feel left out. I had no idea why she was even discussing James. I was shocked that she would think such a thing. I'd only known James for a few months, and as long as my father was alive, I wasn't going to let any random person accompany me down the aisle on my wedding day. To me, James was simply my mother's husband, not my stepfather. I made it quite plain to her. I informed her that I had no plan of asking James at any time, and if she thought I would, she was misinformed. I'd never mentioned or hinted at anything like that, so I had no idea why she suddenly believed it. It was just ridiculous. To make matters worse, when she realized I was serious and that my biological father would be walking me down the aisle instead of her husband, she threw a fit in my room. She stated that if this were the case, she and James would not attend the wedding. Apparently, she had assumed that I was closer to her, and so James would be the one to walk me down the aisle. She felt that if both she and my father accompanied me down the aisle, it would convey the incorrect message and make James feel insecure. She kept having her tantrums, but I didn't have time for them, especially the night before my wedding, when I needed to sleep. So I ended it by informing her that if she didn't want to attend the wedding, she could leave with James. Then I requested her to leave my room so that I could sleep. When I awoke the next morning, my mother was not there. I told everyone close to me about what happened the night before, including my immediate family, spouse, and bridesmaids. I knew I'd be busy for the rest of the day, so there was no time to ponder about her. Looking back, I'm grateful for it because it would have probably ruined my mood. My father and stepmother eventually walked me down the aisle, and a few people exchanged puzzled looks, but no one said anything because it was clear I wanted it to be a happy day without any issues. I like my stepmother, so I didn't mind when she walked me down the aisle, and the wedding went well. But, 1 hour before the celebrations were to conclude, my mother arrived at the reception with James, and she had a really embarrassed expression on her face, so I knew she was there to apologize. I had been drinking, and I was overjoyed from just getting married, so I didn't mind her returning for the reception and was more than willing to forgive her. I accepted her apology and told her she may join everyone else. Instead, she stayed by our side and explained that she had a favor to ask. She asked us to rework the wedding ceremony so she could be a part of it as well. My husband and I were both stunned by the absurdity of the request, and we instantly denied. But then she began pleading with us, and even James was concerned. He said that she needed us to do this as a favor because otherwise, my grandmother would cut her off. Both of my father's parents attended the wedding, but my grandmother, my mother's only surviving parent, was unable to attend due to her out-of-state residence and medical concerns that precluded her from traveling. I promised my grandmother I'd send her a video of the wedding. While my mother and James were driving home, my grandmother video called my mother to chat with me. That's when my mother realized she had made a mistake, and she was now worried about what her mother would think about her actions during my wedding. That's why she asked me to recreate the ceremony so she could be a part of it and my grandmother wouldn't find out what occurred. My mother honestly thought it was a reasonable answer because the venue was still paid for, the decorations were up and the majority of the guests hadn't left yet. But I held firm and informed my mother that she chose to leave the previous night and it was her fault. I was not going to restart my wedding only to correct her mistake. She began arguing, insisting that we do things her way so that her mother would not cut her off. My grandmother loves family relationships, and the only reason she couldn't go was health. If she found out my mother had done anything so dumb, she would not hesitate to cut her off. Because I am her only grandchild and she cherishes me, everyone knew she would be devastated if she found out what my mother had done. That's why my mother was so determined to resolve the matter before my grandmother found out. I wasn't in the mood for a battle with my mother, and my grandmother kept attempting to video call her. So I phoned my maid of honor, took my phone from her, and before my mother could say or do anything, I FaceTimed my grandmother to tell her the truth. I had had enough of my mother's moaning. My grandmother was delighted to see me and after a brief discussion about the wedding, I got right to the issue. I told her exactly what had happened to my mother and how she wanted me to restart the wedding especially for her. I did all of this in front of my mother, who was frozen in place. When I turned the phone around so my grandmother could face her, my mother said nothing. My grandmother raged at her for a full 6 minutes, expressing her disappointment. She informed my mother that she did not need to return home for the holidays and did not want to speak with her until I had forgiven her. Only then would she contemplate making amends with my mother again. After my grandmother hung up, my mother and James remained there, speechless. I expected them to have an outburst, but they didn't. They simply went after a few minutes without saying anything, which was ideal because throwing a tantrum would have wrecked the rest of the reception. We decided not to talk about my mother or James for the remainder of the evening so that they would not ruin it for us. My grandmother called the day after the wedding, after we had returned home, to discuss all that had happened. She revealed that she had been having problems with my mother for some months as a result of her decision to marry James. My grandmother had been extremely opposed to my mother's fast marriage from the start because they had only known each other for a few months. She didn't think it was wise for my mother to rush into a marriage like that, which made sense. But my mother paid no heed to her. They didn't talk for a few months after the wedding because my grandmother called it a bad decision, and my mother took offense. After a few months, my mother apologized and went to visit my grandmother with James to make things right. Despite my grandmother's kindness, James remained apart from her. He pretended he was too good to converse with her, rejecting all of her attempts to get to know him. This gave my grandmother a negative impression of him, and she began to dislike him even more after that visit. She told my mother about her fears, and they argued throughout the last few months. My mother kept playing the same card, claiming that her parents thought my father was the appropriate guy for her, but marrying him proved to be the worst mistake of her life. She felt my grandmother was unwilling to give James a fair chance because they hadn't been together long. My grandmother believed she had given him a fair chance, emphasizing that her problems were with the hasty nature of the marriage, not James as a person. However, James took it personally and continued his attitude, resulting in increased tension. Things had been strained between my mother and grandmother for months, and the recent FaceTime call on the day of my wedding was the final straw for my grandmother. She couldn't believe my mother skipped my wedding simply because I refused to let James lead me down the aisle. We had no idea whether James or my mother had come up with this concept, but it made no difference. My mother chose to miss my wedding, then pretended it never happened and wanted me to recreate everything so my grandmother would not find out. After discussing it, my grandmother and I understood that my mother had taken both of us for granted. We resolved not to speak with her for a few months until we were ready to forgive her or she really apologized. My grandmother wrote a message to my mother on our behalf, asking her not to contact us until we were ready to communicate and hoping she would respect that. I thought this was a decent answer, but my mother began blaming me for everything. She wrote me nasty messages last night, claiming that it was my fault that her own mother was not speaking to her. She remarked that if I didn't want to redo the wedding, I could have simply said so, which I did several times. She accused me of intentionally escalating the situation by involving my grandmother. She felt that I didn't need to tell my grandmother and give her more reasons to be furious with her. My mother thought I was ganging up on her by recruiting my grandmother, and she thought it was unjust. She did not think I should have dragged my grandmother into our argument. I think she's simply whining, but she could have a point. Is it my fault for bringing my grandmother into this conflict with my mother? Update 1. Thank you to everyone who provided positive comments on my post. I've decided to block my mother and end this nonsense. I don't need to put up with her conduct anymore. She's been acting strangely since she started dating James, and I don't need such negativity in my life. My husband and I are heading to Paris for our honeymoon next week, and I want to enjoy ourselves without worrying about my mother. Blocking her means that I don't hear from her throughout this period. I've always tried to treat Mom with the same love and respect that I've shown my father, but after all of this, I no longer feel bound to do so. My father has always treated me better, so I don't think it's wrong to stop treating her equally. I discussed everything with my grandmother, father, and husband, and they all believe that barring her is the proper decision. Most of them say I should have blocked her a long time ago, perhaps on the day of the wedding itself. But I delayed because it was difficult for me to let go of the concept of having a nice relationship with my mother. It now has to be completed. I can't let her treat me this way and get away with it, and I'm going to make sure I put my foot down now. Update 2. Hello everyone, well my hubby and I are departing for our honeymoon tomorrow. I must have told it to my mother at some point, as she appeared to remember. I'm not sure how I feel about what just transpired, but I'm going to post it here because I feel compelled to keep you all informed. In my previous update, I noted that I had blocked my mother everywhere, so she sent an email to my work email address, which I had not blocked. I didn't expect her to contact me there, so I was thrown off guard. I had intended to delete the email, but curiosity got the better of me, and I ended up reading it with my spouse. We both felt strange at the conclusion because my mother expressed her love for me and apologized for her recent actions in the email. She explained that the only reason she wanted James to lead me down the aisle was because he insisted. She claimed it was not her idea and even attempted to postpone the wedding for a few months to get to know him better. James put pressure on her, and the night before the wedding, he twisted her into believing that if my father walked me down the aisle instead of him, people would misinterpret it. She supported him throughout the email because she loved him, but she also expressed regret over everything. She felt torn between James and her family, and she could now relate to how I felt as a child of divorce. She acknowledged James's tendency to be controlling, but she didn't mind it. After chatting for a few days, they both agreed that his domineering nature had produced problems in the family. He committed to work on it, and she pledged to stand up for herself rather than be a doormat. She closed the email by wishing us well and expressing her want to reconnect once we returned from our honeymoon. What worries me isn't the apology, it's that James might not be the appropriate guy for my mother. Although she stated that they will work on it, the way she characterized James gave me the impression that something was wrong and that she was covering for him. My husband and I are going tomorrow, so we cannot deal with this right now. We decided to let her handle the situation. I notified my father, who, regardless of his feelings for my mother, would never harm her since he is a wonderful person. I also told one of her closest friends, whom she has known since childhood, and I'm convinced she would not gossip. With her friend and my father informed, I feel certain that my mother will be cared for and that I will be able to enjoy a worry-free honeymoon. Update 3. Hello, this is going to be a brief update. I last posted an update around 4 months ago, just before leaving for my honeymoon. We intended to deal with whatever was going on with my mother and James when we returned, but when I emailed my mother following our return, I never received a response. Her friends informed me she appeared to be happy, so I figured everything was okay and moved on with my work. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, and I heard from my mom again. She thanked me for telling her friend about my concerns about James, especially because she lacked the guts to express them herself. It turns out I was correct. James was not the ideal guy for her. He had tried to isolate her from everyone, even urging her to cut links with a childhood acquaintance. After she repeatedly canceled plans with her friend challenged her, and my mother eventually broke down and told everything. James had been treating her horribly, and she couldn't take it any longer. She filed for divorce with the help of a friend and has been living with them ever since. My mother thanked me for looking out for her and informing her friend about my concerns. Without that, She doubted anyone would have noticed what was going on. I'm pleased she's getting out of the situation, and I hope we can all assist her move forward. Even my grandmother was surprised, but we're all doing our best to support my mother. We simply hope that things improve from here. Parents kicked me out because of my sister's pregnancy. Now, they're reaching out a year later to mend things, but I've moved on. My parents kicked me, 19F, out of my house almost a year ago, just a few weeks after turning 18. That wasn't even the worst part. It happened during finals week in high school, and I had nowhere to go. Fortunately, I have good friends since my best friend and her parents took me in, and I am quite grateful to them. My parents kicked me out because my older sister became pregnant, and they thought she needed to move back home so she could be well cared for. She is not even my whole biological sister, she is a half-sister. My mother had been dating my stepfather, Jacob, while they were in college, and she became pregnant a few months before graduation. However, she was too young at the time and chose not to marry him. It was only a fling, and they split up. Jacob, on the other hand, remained determined to be a father, so they co-parented Sasha, my half-sister, and maintained contact. When Sasha was 3, my mother met my biological father. They dated for 2 years before marrying. 1 year into their marriage, she became pregnant with me. However, my father was not prepared and wanted to end the pregnancy. My mother refused, and they separated ways. After my father abandoned my pregnant mother, she severed all relations with him and his family before reconciling with Jacob. My father had passed away by the time I was born, and my mother and Jacob reared me. They married a few years after her divorce from my father was finalized, but I never regarded Jacob as a family member because he never treated me as such. I guess Jacob reunited with my mother while she was pregnant with me because he still loved her and wanted to be on her good side. But to him, I was always a burden. He'd been frigid to me since I was a child, and Sasha treated me similarly. While I got along well with my mother, I never developed a bond with Jacob or Sasha, despite the fact that we lived as a family. They always treated me as an outsider. My mother has always claimed to love me as much as they do, but I've never felt that way. She never acknowledged our estrangement, and despite my attempts to connect with them when I was younger, I was always rejected. As I grew older, I saw what was going on and gave up on pursuing a relationship with Jacob and Sasha. I shouldn't have been surprised when they kicked me out because Sasha was expecting and wanted to move back in. However, it came as a shock. I should have known that Sasha would always be Jacob's priority, no matter how much older she was than me. Still, I hoped my mother would defend me, but she didn't. Sasha approached me around a year ago, just 2 days before finals week, and informed me that she was pregnant. She was 24 at the time, which made her 6 years older than me. Despite this, my parents decided to kick me out to create a place for her and help her save money. Sasha and her boyfriend, who had been together since high school, lived in a little apartment not far from our house. I thought it was appropriate for her to remain there, but she wanted to return home. She didn't feel safe remaining in the apartment alone because she works from home and her partner has to travel for work on occasion. She wanted to move back in with her parents while pregnant to avoid being alone and save money on rent. Her boyfriend was also planning to move in with her at our apartment. So Sasha and my parents decided she would return home. That would have been okay with me, but they informed me I had to vacate my room for a few months since they required it for her. Sasha already had a room in our house, but after she left for college, Jacob converted it into an office. My parents informed me she couldn't stay in the living room, therefore the only option was for me to give up my room. They asked that I think of it as a sacrifice for my family. I might not have been as upset if they hadn't had this chat with me immediately before my first exam. I was already stressed from preparing for tests and I had a lot of exams coming up in the next 2 weeks. They only worried about Sasha and her pregnancy. I put my foot down and told them I wasn't leaving because Sasha had never treated me like family, so I didn't need to make any sacrifices for her. My parents attempted to reason with me, but I believed they were being unreasonable, and we argued until they snapped. Jacob told me I had to leave by the end of the week or I'd be tossed out, and no one could stop him because I was an adult. He stated that he had the right to decide whether or not I may stay at his place. I expected my mother to protect me, but instead she sided with Jacob. She stated they needed to make room for their real grandkids, and didn't have the time or energy to argue with me about it. She told me to do as I was told. My mom's use of the word real grandkids reaffirmed what I had already felt and known for years. My mom, Sasha, and Jacob were their own little family, and I had always been an outsider. I was really unhappy and decided to begin packing my things right away, oblivious to the fact that I had an exam the following day. They didn't even try to stop me as I departed, revealing where their priorities lay. I ended up on my best friend's doorstep. When I explained everything to her and her parents, they invited me to stay with them as long as I wanted. Many of you may wonder why I didn't ask for support from family members, but I don't know any. Jacob's family is exactly like him. They don't like me at all, and I knew addressing them would be futile. They would do everything they could to avoid helping me. My mother's side of the family is also unfamiliar to me. Apparently, her parents and the rest of the family abandoned her when she became pregnant with Sasha. They wanted her to concentrate on her studies and did not want her to continue with the pregnancy because she was too young. She did it anyhow, and no one has spoken to her since. They weren't even present for her wedding to my father, nor for Sasha's or my birth, as she told me. So since I had no relatives, I turned to my pals. After I was kicked out and moved in with my best friend and her family, I was continually expecting my mother to contact me. I had no such expectations of Jacob or Sasha because I knew they didn't care about me and were probably relieved I left because I never fit into their perfect family. What really hurt me was that my mother didn't contact me. After a few months, I gave up hope completely. A full year has passed since then, and I've heard from a few people that Sasha gave birth a few months back. She and her boyfriend have been sharing how pleased they are to be parents to their baby. The three of them are still living with my parents, perhaps to save money on rent. I honestly couldn't care less about any of it. I've been working on improving my own life. After I graduated from high school, I needed to figure out how to get to college. With little contact with my parents, I also lacked money. My best friend's parents had graciously allowed me to live rent-free, but I couldn't ask them to pay for my schooling, especially since they had 2 children of their own. I was anxious, but fortunately, I had applied for several scholarships. Because I'm a good student, I was able to obtain a scholarship from one of the institutions I applied to. It wasn't my first or even second choice, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to save money. Sasha already had a room in our house, but after she left for college, Jacob converted it into an office. My parents informed me that she could not stay in the living room, so the only logical choice was for me to give up my room. They begged me to consider it a sacrifice for my family. If they hadn't told me this just before my first exam, I wouldn't have been so unhappy. I was already nervous about studying for my examinations, which were due in the following 2 weeks, but they seemed to be more concerned with Sasha and her pregnancy. I put my foot down and told them I wasn't leaving since Sasha had never treated me like family, so I didn't feel obligated to make any sacrifices for her. My parents attempted to reason with me, but I believed they were being unreasonable, and we argued until they snapped. Jacob told me that I had to go by the end of the week or I would be tossed out because I was legally an adult and he had the right to decide whether I stayed in his house or not. I expected my mother to protect me, but she sided with Jacob. She explained that they needed to make room for their real grandkids, and did not have the time or energy to argue with me about it. Hearing her refer to Sasha's children as real grandkids, reinforced what I had assumed for years. My mother, Sasha, and Jacob had their own small family, and I had always been the outsider. I was so unhappy that I started packing my things right away, ignoring the fact that I had a test the next day. They didn't even try to stop me as I departed, revealing where their priorities lay. I landed up at my best friend's house, and after explaining everything to her and her parents, they invited me to stay with them as long as I needed. You might wonder why I didn't ask other family members for assistance, but I don't really have any. Jacob's family dislikes me, so I knew it would be fruitless to seek assistance. I never knew anyone on my mother's side of the family. My mother always told me that when she became pregnant with Sasha, her family cut her off because they wanted her to focus on her studies. They didn't want her to get pregnant since she was too young, but she did anyway, and no one has spoken to her since. They weren't even present for her wedding to my father, let alone either of our births, according to her. So I didn't think I had any relatives to turn to, so I went to my pals instead. After I was kicked out and moved in with my best friend and her family, I kept expecting my mother to contact me. I had no such expectations of Jacob or Sasha, as they clearly didn't care about me and were probably relieved that I had left. What pained me the most was that my mother did not reach out at all. After a few months, I gave up hope completely. It has been a year since then. I found out from friends that Sasha had given birth a few months ago and that she and her boyfriend have been posting about their new life as delighted parents. They are still living with my parents, probably to economize on rent. I honestly don't care about any of that stuff anymore. I've been working on improving my own life. After graduating from high school, I needed to figure out how to get to college. It wasn't easy without having my parents' financial assistance. My best friend's parents were generous enough to let me live rent-free, but I couldn't ask them to pay for my tuition, especially since they had 2 children of their own. I was apprehensive, but thankfully, I had applied for numerous scholarships, and because I was a brilliant student, I was awarded one. It was not my first or even second choice of education, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to save money. The scholarship covered 60% of my tuition. So I chose to get a student loan alongside my closest friends' parents as co-signers. I promised them that they wouldn't have to worry about repaying the debt because I would work while studying and pay it off myself. That is what I have been doing. It's been difficult, but knowing I'm succeeding on my own is wonderful. I hadn't heard from my family in a year and I wasn't expecting them to seek out. Surprisingly, approximately a week ago, my mother emailed me and asked me to come home for the weekend. She claimed she missed me, as did Jacob and Sasha, and they wanted to reconcile with me. She stated they were aware they had treated me unfairly. In the email, my mother was unusually charming, faking sincerity. Call it gut instinct, but I sensed something was wrong and did not answer. A few days later, she wrote another email, which I disregarded as well, despite my need to find out what was going on. I realized there had to be another reason. It was improbable they would suddenly feel sorry a year after kicking me out. It looked overly convenient. I received my response 2 days ago, when my maternal grandparents contacted me. I was surprised they were able to contact me, as I was certain my parents had not given them my information. They explained that they had to inquire around and eventually obtained my phone number from one of my high school acquaintances, who trusted them enough to disclose it. It turned out to be my best buddy, and I'm glad she didn't tell me since it was a welcome surprise. My grandparents called, and I couldn't believe it was them. I've never known them, seen them, or heard their voices. I was hesitant at first, but then they FaceTimed me and showed me old photo albums of my mother from her childhood and adolescent years. That's when I started to believe they were my grandparents. We all got rather emotional. I'm not sure why, but I just did. We began talking, and I shared details about my life. I tried to avoid talking about my parents, but it was pointless because they already knew everything. They claimed that one of the main reasons they had not contacted me before was because of my parents. They recently discovered the truth, which prompted them to contact us. I was perplexed. My mother had always told me that when she became pregnant with Sasha, my grandparents cut her off. That was everything I knew. However, there was more to the story. My grandparents emphasized that they were not opposed to my mother having Sasha. Rather, they opposed her connection with Jacob. My mother had lied about her parents to safeguard Jacob's reputation. My grandparents had been supportive of her pregnancy and informed her she had the freedom to choose. However, they did not approve of Jacob because he was a well-known addict. They had all grown up in the same area, attended the same high school, and even went to the same college, so my grandparents were well aware of Jacob's background. They promised my mother that they would financially assist her during and after the pregnancy, but only if she broke up with Jacob. They didn't want him to influence her. After much thinking, my mother ended their relationship because Jacob couldn't get his life in order. My grandparents took complete custody of Sasha once she was born, and Jacob had only supervised visitation privileges for the first few years. Jacob eventually finished his degree and became clean, but he relapsed every several months, so my grandparents never trusted him completely. They introduced my mother to my father, who is the son of a family friend. After a few years of seeing one another on and off, my mother married him because she had given up hope that Jacob would ever recover. But it appears she has never completely moved on from Jacob. A year into her marriage, she began an affair with him and became pregnant again. At that time, my mother had to tell my father about the affair since she couldn't picture her life without Jacob. Now that she was pregnant, she needed to tell him the truth. Her infidelity was the reason she got a divorce from my father and later married Jacob. So everything Mom said about my father's opposition to having me was a lie. After I was born, many paternity tests were performed, and I was happily not Jacob's child. I was, in fact, my biological father's daughter, which was a relief because I had no desire to be Jacob's biological daughter. My father even had partial custody of me for a period, although I scarcely remember it because it was so long ago. Unfortunately, my biological father died in a vehicle accident when I was 7 months old, allowing my mother to lie to me for the remainder of my life. My father's side of the family refused to have anything to do with me after his death, which was convenient for my mother. My grandparents were really disturbed when they discovered my mother was having an affair with Jacob. They gave her another ultimatum. She could either shut Jacob out of her life completely and focus on her marriage with my father, or she could get a divorce and never speak to them again. This time, my mother chose Jacob because he had been clean for about a year, longer than any of his previous stints. That was the final major disagreement my mother had with her parents. My mother was still pregnant at the time, and they did not communicate again until after my birth. My grandparents ultimately softened and decided to contact her so they could meet me, but Jacob refused to play along and form a happy family with them because of how they had treated him. So my mother turned down their attempts to reunite. My grandparents did not give up, however. They attempted to contact my mother every several months, but she never accepted them back into her life. This continued on for years until Jacob and my mother had financial difficulties and were unable to pay their rent. My mother had no one else to turn to, so she contacted her parents. In a great gesture, my grandparents gave her a house, hoping that it would bring them closer together. It was about 6 years ago when my family moved into our new home. It was a great improvement over the apartment we used to live in. I'd often wondered how my parents could afford such a wonderful property in such a desirable neighborhood, given that my mother was a receptionist and Jacob worked in sales. His company had been failing, so it seemed unlikely that they could afford it. I now realize that was all thanks to my grandparents. Despite this, my parents, being the ungrateful people they are, did not attempt to repair their relationship with my grandparents. Both my mother and Jacob were aware that my grandparents had paid for the house, but my mother insisted that they were not ready to reconnect and needed time to think about it. My grandparents, being naive, gave them room for a few months, but when my mother did not respond, they tried again. She kept claiming that she needed more time. This went on for years, and my grandparents eventually admitted that perhaps it wasn't meant to be. They were getting older and told me how humiliating it was to continually attempting to contact their daughter only to be denied each time. They finally admitted to my mother that they understood why she no longer wanted to be around them and regretted themselves for not being gentler in the past. The only thing they wanted was that my mother continue to send photos of our family so that they knew we were doing fine. Surprisingly, my mother agreed, and for the past few years, that was how my grandparents stayed in touch, which was quite sad. They told me everything, and I burst into tears. I had always thought of them as villains, but that was not the case. Now, as for how they discovered the truth. My grandfather just had a health scare with heart problems, and he and my grandma realized they couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Because they weren't getting any younger, they wanted to make one final attempt to reconcile with the family before passing away. They stopped by my mother's house a few weeks ago, which is technically still theirs because they paid for it and their names are on the deed. When they came, my mother had no choice but to welcome and entertain them. They discovered they were great-grandparents when Sasha had her children. But when they asked about me, my parents became really uneasy and had no idea what to say. So they informed my grandparents that I was away at college and that it might not be a good time to contact me because I was in a vulnerable state due to examinations. They couldn't even come up with a false college name, which led my grandparents to suspect something was up. They had a gut feeling that my parents had made a mistake, so they left the house to speak with our neighbors. That is how they discovered that I had not been living with my parents for the past year after being kicked out. The neighbors didn't know why, but their son, who went to school with me, informed my grandparents that I had been staying with my closest friend's family for a while, and they could know more. That's how my grandparents got in touch with my best buddy, and they eventually found out what happened to me. Naturally, they were furious when they discovered the truth. My grandparents informed my mother that she and her family would need to evacuate the house in order to make room for their only real grandchild. It was the epitome of retaliation, using the identical things my parents had used to me. My best friend ensured that my grandparents knew just how to press that nerve. It now became clear why my parents were attempting to reach out and make amends. They were going to lose their home. My grandparents waited a few days to approach me after learning everything because they were concerned about how I would respond. They eventually decided to go forward with it since they had wasted so many years worrying about how my mother would respond, and they wanted to do the right thing now. However, my grandparents also wanted to give me the freedom to choose what I wanted. They told me that if I wanted to give my family another chance, they could continue to live in the house. But if I wanted them to leave, that is what would happen. Apparently, when they came, no one in the family seemed pleased to see them, and I was the only one who appeared truly interested in developing a relationship with them. My grandparents refused to be taken for fools anymore, so I had to decide whether I wanted my parents to have a home or not. If I'm being honest, I suppose I want them tossed out, but that sounds a little harsh. I'm not sure whether that's the appropriate thing to do. What if I told my grandparents I wanted to kick my family out? Update 1. Hello, first and foremost, thank you for all of your encouraging words. It means everything to me, and I appreciate it more than I can express. Regarding my decision, I've concluded that I do want my family to leave that house. I told my grandparents a few days ago, and now they're evicting my family. Of course, there's a lot of legal stuff involved, which my grandparents say I don't need to worry about. My parents have also been emotionally manipulative, particularly Sasha, but my grandparents are impervious to it. After speaking with me, they learned about all the falsehoods my mother had been spreading and how she had poisoned their grandchildren against them. They have no more sympathy for my parents. To be honest, Sasha and her partner are working grown-ups, so I'm confident they'll find something out, just like millions of others. The same applies for my parents. I don't feel guilty about any of it. After all, they didn't feel horrible about kicking me out, knowing I was just 18 and still in school. Despite this, I was able to perform well academically, even though it occurred just before my exams. I urged my grandparents not to worry about my college tuition, but they insisted on handling the student loan I had taken out. They also apologized for not being present for me sooner. We have a lot to talk about and make up for, but everything is going great right now. Update 2. Hello, my grandparents began evicting my family a few weeks back, and they have till the end of next month to depart. My mother is not pleased about it. She felt compelled to inform me, writing an email a few weeks ago in an attempt to regain my trust and heal things, most likely so her parents wouldn't kick her out. The email was quite different from the one I had received before. This one was full of swear words, saying she wished she hadn't given birth to me. She even said she wishes I had been in the vehicle accident with my father, so we might both have died. So that's my mom for you. But it no longer bothers me since, to me, she is not family. If I'm being honest, my only family now consists of my grandparents, my best friend, her parents, and a few relatives whom my grandparents are introducing me to. My mother broke them off long ago since she didn't want anything to do with her family. It's an unusual scenario, but I'm adjusting. Update 3. Hello, the holidays have just begun, and I'm back home in my old house. It feels strange to be here, but my grandparents have been living in the house since my family departed, and they've done an excellent job of renovating it. Even my room seems like home again. We'll be throwing a Thanksgiving dinner shortly, and we've invited some family members, my best friend, and her parents. I feel like my life is finally getting back on track. I'm very happy, and I wish I could stay this way forever. My wife cheated on me with our horrible neighbor while I was paralyzed, but a life-changing surgery gave me a second chance to rebuild my life. My name is Ethan John. In the last year or two, my life has been a roller coaster of unbelievable lows and surprising highs. It all began with a terrible accident that left me paralyzed and unable to move or talk. But this was only the beginning of my horror. What followed was a string of betrayals, abuse, and misery that nearly destroyed me. Despite everything, I managed to survive and even thrive. Here's my tale. I was involved in an accident. I was riding my motorcycle on a lovely afternoon when a truck driver, apparently unaware of me, pulled out onto the highway. The collision was terrible. I don't remember much of the impact, just a flash of metal and then darkness. When I awoke in the hospital, I was unable to move. I could not talk. I could scarcely blink. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. Lucky? That word struck me as a cruel joke at the moment. I was immobilized from the neck down, unable to do more than breathe and blink. I couldn't swallow without trouble. Going to the bathroom? Don't get me started on the humiliation. The only silver lining, if you can call it that, was the multi-million-dollar payout I received from the transportation firm. All of my medical expenditures were paid, and I would receive a monthly stipend to sustain my wife, Laura, and me for the rest of our lives. We were financially secure, thanks to my disability payments and Laura's job as a paralegal. But money could not repair what was broken within me. After 6 months in the hospital, I was finally allowed to return home. I believed things would improve once I was in familiar surroundings, but I was mistaken. That's when my life took a darker turn. How's that? The counselor inquired, staring at me. I'm quite ashamed. I don't think I can even remember what happened in those 6 months, I remarked, a tear running down my cheek. That's okay, she responded in response. Everything you say here will remain confidential. Remember that I'm here to help you heal. I nodded and took a glass of water before proceeding. Let us start with your marriage. Tell me a little about that. I told her about my marriage to Laura, how we met in college and got married after we graduated. I was only 25 years old when my injury occurred, and we had been married for 3 years. I worked as a mechanical engineer, and she was a paralegal at a large law company downtown. We were able to afford a spacious 3-bedroom apartment. Originally, we intended to convert one bedroom into a nursery. We both used the second bedroom as an office, but after my accident, the nursery became my room because it was spacious enough to house all of my medical equipment. Laura did her best to care for me for the first month or two, but it was evident that she wasn't up to the task, particularly with the bathroom. So she sought assistance. Greg and Callie Wallace, our neighbors, offered to help in any way they could. At the time, I considered them pals. Greg, an attorney at Laura's business, frequently drove her to work. Callie was a nurse at a nearby hospital, so she would check in on me from time to time to ensure I was okay. She even helped us get a home health nurse to check on me during the day. Laura was clearly not up to the task after a month, even with all of the assistance. That's when Greg stepped in. The counselor asked, "Yes." It began innocently enough, but I could see he had feelings for my wife. She frequently broke down crying, and he was always there to soothe her. I could hear them in the front room, making out on our couch. Then he would take her into our former master bedroom and have sex with her. But it didn't end there, did it? The counselor inquired. I shake my head. No, I replied. Afterward, he would come into my room to taunt me, telling me how he felt after screwing my wife. I saw the counselor's expression. Sorry, I apologized. Where was his wife during all of this? The counselor inquired. Was she working? Yes, she often worked strange shifts, and it wasn't unusual for her to be gone all night, working the graveyard shift. I see, the counselor replied. Go on. I took a big breath before proceeding. After about a month, he entered my room as Laura was taking a shower. I was so ashamed that I couldn't finish my statement. Did he abuse you? The counselor inquired. I nodded as I wiped the tears from my face. Yes, I said gently. How often did this happen? The counselor inquired. I'm not sure, maybe a couple of times every week for about 4 months. He even said he was going to invite some of his friends over to have fun with me. Did your wife know this was going on? The counselor inquired. I shrugged my shoulders. I do not know. She was never present when it happened. She'd always come by later and say how great it was to have people like Greg to look after me. I'll never forget the day he hauled in that blasted monitor and installed it on my dresser. He linked it up to a camera and made me watch while he screwed my wife. Laura thought it was great that he brought it in. When did the abuse stop? The counselor inquired. The day Dr. Victor stopped over to see me. I remember that day like it was yesterday. Laura invited Dr. Victor and my attorney into my room, just a few hours after Greg had abused me. Dr. Victor was an older, slightly shorter, balding man with a German accent. I reflected on the visit. Ethan, there's a Dr. Victor here to see you, Laura remarked as she led him into my room. Dr. Victor approached and introduced himself to me. He also introduced an assistant with a tablet. My lawyer, Jacob Harrison, was also present. Ethan, I'm Dr. Franklin Victor, and I'm here to discuss a possible treatment for your condition. He looked at Laura before proceeding. I'll take care of it from here, Missy, he explained. Please wait in the other room. She exited the room, but I noticed a concerned expression on her face. He returned my gaze, pulled up a chair and sat down, looked me in the eyes before responding. Now Ethan, allow me to explain. I manage a high-end research facility on Lake Arrowhead. We've been conducting revolutionary research on 3D bone restoration and nerve healing implants. I believe your situation is tailor-made for us. I glanced at your record, and I know how much damage you've sustained, he said. I believe we can help you regain the most, if not all, of your physical ability. Is this something you might be interested in? Please blink once to confirm and twice to deny. What else could I say about something like this? Of course. Of course, I did blink once. Good, he replied with a smile. Now, you must understand that this is all experimental, but we have received approval for human testing. Thanks to external grants, it will cost you nothing. That was fantastic news, but I was apprehensive about the experimentation. I know you're probably concerned about this being experimental, he continued as if he could read my mind. Don't be concerned about that. Even if the operation fails, you will not be any worse off than you are today. But I feel you are a good candidate, and I'm confident that everything will be all right. In fact, if we're as successful as I expect, you'll be stronger than you were before the accident. That gave me hope, so I listened as he described the operation. Essentially, he said that all of the damaged vertebrae would be replaced with vertebrae composed of a composite material that was stronger than the originals. In addition, the new vertebrae would be created using a 3D printer and data from my own body. In principle, the new bones would be perfect replicas of the old ones, albeit stronger. In addition, he would put tiny electrical implants to assist mend the injured nerves. The operation would take 3 to 4 hours, and the recuperation period could be several days, depending on how quickly I healed. Dr. Victor also stated that he had already evaluated the data from my stay and began the process of manufacturing the new bones. I hope you don't mind, he remarked. Initially, we wanted to explore if we could recreate the injured bone using data from your records. We chose to proceed with the surgery after determining that we could. When I was strong enough, he indicated I could start physical therapy, which may last a few weeks. So is this something you would like to try? The man inquired. Blink once for yes or twice for no. Of course, I did blink once. He smiled as he rubbed his hands together. Very good, he declared. He motioned his helper to join us. Please let Mr. John read the agreement. The assistant came over and held the tablet as I read the agreement. When I was finished, Dr. Victor asked whether I agreed again, ordering me to blink once to indicate yes. I blinked once. Very well, he remarked, asking his aide to have me electronically sign using my thumbprint. Once that was completed, Jacob countersigned to confirm that he had witnessed my approval to the operation. Are you ready to get started? He inquired. Of course, I did blink once. He smiled. Let's get going. Greg, we have everything you'll need at our facilities. He directed to his aide to take me out of the apartment and into a huge van waiting in the parking area. Laura stopped us on our way out. Where are you going? She inquired. Dr. Victor stared at her before responding, Your husband has agreed to a procedure that could help him get back on his feet. Where are you taking him? She inquired. How long will he be gone? How much will this cost? We are transporting him to my facility on Lake Arrowhead, the doctor stated. He may be gone for several weeks, depending on how well he responds to the treatment and rehabilitation. His doctor and lawyer are well aware of what is going on and they have given their approval, as has your spouse. Cost is not a concern. Now if you don't mind, let's get started. Wait, I haven't seen any agreement and I don't even know what's going to happen. He doesn't need your approval, Mrs. John, Jacob said. He is crippled, not incompetent. Everything was explained to him, and he gave his permission. You want your husband to get healthy, right? Yes, of course I do, she replied. I could sense a hint of shame in her voice. Can I at least come see him? Perhaps after the procedure, when he's up to having visitors, you can come, the doctor suggested. Otherwise, you should probably stay right here for now. We will be in touch. Perhaps now is a good moment to say farewell and wish your husband well. Laura moved in front of me and kissed me on the lips. Get well, honey. Let me know when I can come to see you, okay? Of course, I couldn't say anything, but I felt hot inside. Dr. Victor and his aide rolled me out to the van. Once I was inside, the helper took the wheel and we were on our way. I could see Laura standing in the parking lot, watching us depart. I had no idea what she was thinking, but I felt like I'd just been freed from a hostage situation. A few hours later, we arrived at the facility and I was led into a very lovely room where many nurses began prepping me for the treatment. I hope you don't mind, Ethan, but I thought it best to get started right away, Victor, your doctor remarked. He turned to face the nurses. Once you have him prepared, please bring him to the operating room. Yes, Dr. Victor, one of the nurses replied. Okay, Ethan, I will leave you in the capable hands of your nurses, and I'll see you in the OR, he said before leaving. Soon, they had me undressed, bathed and dressed in a robe that revealed my back. They put me on a stretcher and transported me to the operating room, where 3 extremely large orderlies carefully scooped me up and laid me face down on the table. The anesthesiologist performed his duties and the last thing I heard before leaving was Dr. Victor saying, "Oh my." I had no idea what he was referring to. I awoke still face down, but this time I was in some sort of device that kept me immobilized. I had a tube down my mouth and an IV implanted into my arm. My right arm was fitted with a blood pressure bracelet. Suddenly, the device rotated and I found myself looking up at Dr. Victor. You're awake, he stated. Good. You'll be pleased to hear that the operation went smoothly. We'll have to keep you motionless for a few days to ensure proper healing. After all, we had to do a lot of replacing. You may have tingling or itching in your back. This is normal. That means the implants are performing their function. Both the nurses and I will keep a careful eye on you. Don't be scared. The apparatus you're in will rotate your body periodically. Just try to relax for now, okay? We'll talk in a few days. After that, he checked my vital signs, gave the nurses some instructions and left. Relax, what else was I going to do? He was correct about one thing. I did feel a tingling feeling in the middle of my back, which irritated me to no end. I also felt itchy and wanted to scratch, but I couldn't. As unpleasant as it was refreshing to feel something for the first time in almost a year. That night, 2 nurses came in to wash me down. I could feel them washing my legs, buttocks, and back. I was more than startled, I was shocked. I could really feel what they were doing. They rolled over the bed and started washing me from the front. That's when I caught a good look at them. They were both very young and gorgeous. One had shoulder-length blonde hair, while the other was brunette. As they bathed me, I felt something different. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I couldn't move my head, but I noticed a smile on their faces as they observed me. The blonde gazed at me. "Well, I'm no doctor, but it looks like something is working down here," she added with a smile. They giggled slightly but continued to do their work. They finished what they were doing and departed the room, but not before offering me some encouragement. I ended up being in the device for 4 days. The days were pretty much the same. Every morning, I had x-rays done, and nurses would massage my arms and legs. Later in the day, I received a thorough sponge bath. As the days passed, I became more aware of what was happening to me. On the 4th day, Dr. Victor came into my room and examined me attentively. He sat down next to me, pulled out a pin, and immediately inserted it in my calf. I felt something and made a noise. I couldn't say anything because I still had a tube in my throat. He stared at me. "Did you feel that?" he inquired. I blinked once and attempted to nod my head, but I couldn't because it was still strapped down. He smiled. "Very good." He asked me to try moving my toes. I was surprised to learn that I could. Then he instructed me to move my fingers, and I did. "Outstanding," he said. He checked my x-rays thoroughly and summoned some nurses. "I think it's time we got Mr. John out of this contraption." They took the tube out of my throat, removed my catheter, reconnected all of the tubes, and released me from the device. Then they carried me to a gurney and took me to my room, where they put me in a bed. Dr. Victor spoke with the nurses before sitting down next to me. "I can't tell you how pleased I am with your results," he told me. "We will need to start your physical therapy right away, and we will begin with some exercises you may do in your bed. I don't want to put too much pressure on your back right now." He inserted a cup with a straw into my mouth. "Take a drink." I did, and it felt great going down my throat. "Try to say something," he advised when I finished swallowing. "Wow," I muttered. He laughed and nodded his head. "That will do," he said. "How do you feel?" "Like a new man," I replied, my voice still feeble. I could feel my eyes beginning to water. This was the first time I'd been able to do or say anything since my accident. He grabbed a tissue and wiped my eyes. "I understand this is an extremely emotional moment for you, Ethan. For now, I want you to relax. Don't overdo it. Your back still has to heal, but the implants appear to be operating properly. I'm concerned that you've lost some muscle mass since the accident, so we'll set you up with a diet and exercise plan to assist you regain muscle function. Now I'd like to present you to the staff members who will be looking after you." He waved his hand and several young women entered the room. "I'm Emily, your nutritionist. Now will be your physical therapist," he explained, indicating to a short-haired muscular blonde who nodded once. "Rachel will be your day nurse," he announced, pointing to a tiny woman with short brown hair. "And this is Megan, your night nurse," he explained, gesturing to a taller, red-haired woman. Her eyes twinkled as she smiled at me. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Now, if there is anything you need, please feel free to let us know," the doctor remarked. "We all live here at the facility, so we're available 24 hours a day." He motioned for the women to leave the room briefly before returning to me. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something. This is a difficult subject, so please let me know if you feel uncomfortable." "I'm curious," I stated. "I detected a good degree of rectal damage when we began the surgery on you. I also collected samples of what I found in that region. I'm not here to condemn, but I was wondering." "No," I murmured, feeling ashamed. "I see," he replied. "So you were abused?" Tears started to pour down my cheeks. "Yes. I was able to get out." He cleaned my face before speaking. "You are aware that I have an obligation to disclose this to the authorities. In this state, abusing a disabled person is a felony, as well as a hate crime. I collected samples of what I discovered, and the lab is conducting an analysis that includes DNA. Do you know who did this to you?" "Yes," I said gently. "Was your wife involved?" he inquired. "I do not know. She was never present when he did it." "I see," he replied. "Are you willing to name the person who did this to you?" I nodded my head. "Yes," I informed him. "Good, I will call the authorities once we have completed the analysis. In the interim, I'll connect you with a counselor." "Thanks." "You are welcome. Now, shall we focus on getting you back on your feet?" They fitted a contraption to the head of my enormous bed that allowed me to lift weights while lying down, but Dr. Victor didn't want me to use it right away. For the first week, they simply had me do hand exercises and brought in a machine to perform leg workouts. Na proved to be quite the therapist. As she yelled for cadence, I pushed with one foot and then the other. "I spy drivey," she retorted in German, and I strained to keep up. I couldn't help but notice her accent was much stronger than Dr. Victor's. She would have made an excellent drill coach, I thought, as she urged me to move faster. Gut, she exclaimed. We'll feed you some protein to get your muscles back in condition. Every Fraulein in town will be after you, and probably a frustrated Hausfrau or two, she said with a wicked giggle. This gets us to the present. She set down her pen and looked at the counselor, who had carefully listened to my narrative. Ethan, the next few weeks will be very challenging for you. Frankly, I'm not sure which will be more difficult, the physical or mental recuperation. I'm delighted you feel comfortable talking to me about this, and I hope you take action against the people who harmed you. They breached the law and must be dealt with. I want you to know that I'm here for you, and you may contact me at any time. Okay? Okay, thanks. With that, the session was over, and I was taken back to my room. A few of the days later, Dr. Victor entered my room, leading a couple of men in dark suits. I realized Jacob was with them. After chasing the nurses out of my room, the doctor sat down beside me. Ethan, these men are here to talk about your circumstances at home. I also called your lawyer. I hope you do not mind. Not at all, I replied. Jacob appeared stunned when he heard me say, You're looking much better, Ethan, he murmured, standing over me. I grinned as I reached out to shake his hand. Surprised, he agreed and shook my hand. Thank you, I am feeling a lot better. I can now eat on my own. He is doing quite well, Dr. Victor added. If all goes well, he'll be even stronger than he was before the accident. That's good to hear, Jacob responded. Ethan, this is Agent Cole and Agent Davis from the state police. They're come to take your statement. Are you ready to speak with them? Absolutely. The three guys took up chairs, and Agent Cole produced a recorder. Mr. John, I hope you don't mind if we record this interview, he said. Not at all, I replied. They spent the next hour taking notes and asking questions as I described the past 4 months of abuse at the hands of someone I believed was a friend. This was the third time I had to admit what had happened to me, and it was equally humiliating and agonizing. And you say this Mr. Wallace is the man who assaulted you repeatedly? Agent Cole inquired. Yes, I answered. I have the sample I took from Mr. John, along with the analysis, Dr. Victor stated. There was considerable rectal injury that needed to be addressed. That's all in my report. Agent Cole stated. We'll need to take that into evidence. Dr. Victor nodded his head. Tell me, Mr. John, Agent Cole asked, glancing back at me. Is this the same Greg Wallace who works at McMaster and Williams law firm? Yes, it is, I answered. And your wife works at this firm as well? Yes, she does, I informed him. And you allege that the two of them have been engaged in an affair during this time? He inquired. That's correct, I replied. Was she ever present when the assaults took place? Agent Cole inquired. I shake my head. She was at the apartment, but we never shared a room, as far as I recall. Indeed, she appeared to believe that he was assisting me in some way. I see, the agent replied. Nevertheless, we'll have to bring her in as an accessory. Even if she wasn't physically in the same room, it's hard to believe she didn't notice anything was wrong. Ethan, are you certain about all of this? Jacob inquired, surprised. I know Greg personally, and I find it hard to believe he would do something like this. Maybe you don't know him as well as you think, I remarked rhetorically. You have Dr. Victor's report, and you have the sample. I can't explain it, Jacob replied. I take it you're going to want a divorce from your wife. Absolutely, I said, nodding. Okay, I'll start the paperwork. I'll contact you before we file. I also want a restraining order, I informed him. I don't want either of them anywhere near me, and I sure as heck don't want them in my apartment. As of right now, we'll be treating your apartment as a potential crime scene, Agent Cole informed us. How much longer is Mr. John going to be here? He inquired. Hard to say, the doctor replied. At least 5 more weeks, possibly longer. It depends on how well he reacts to the treatment and therapy. Very well, Cole replied. At least he'll be safe for a while longer. He turned to face his buddy. Get a search warrant for the John apartment and arrest warrants for Mrs. John and Mr. Wallace. The other agent nodded and left the room. Cole turned around to face me. Just so you know, Mr. John, Cole explained, we're going to charge your wife as an accessory. If it comes down to it, are you willing to testify against her in court? Yes, I said. Okay, he replied quietly. Davis had returned and gave a thumbs up. The warrant will be ready when we get back to the office. Cole nodded and packed his gear, including the sample he received from Dr. Victor. We'll be in touch, Mr. John, he added. I hope everything works out for you. Thank you, I replied. After they went, Jacob approached me. Ethan, you are making serious charges. Greg might lose everything. His job, his license, and possibly even his wife. Are you very convinced about this? I'm 100% confident, Jacob. I honestly do not care if he loses everything. In fact, given what he has done, he deserves to lose everything. I hope you are on my side in this. Tell me right now if you aren't, and I'll get another lawyer. I am on your side, Ethan. It's only, I don't know. It's difficult for me to believe. I met his wife and ate in their home. I've never seen anything to indicate he'd do something so dumb. Well, he did, I explained. Can I sue him as well? I don't see any reason why not, Jacob responded. We reside in one of the few states where alienation of affection cases are permitted, so I will investigate that as well. However, you should be aware that they rarely travel far. I genuinely apologize for this, Ethan. I had no idea. It is not your fault. I had no means to let anyone know. We exchanged goodbyes, and he went. I felt slightly better knowing that something was going to be done. The next few weeks passed fast. Na had me standing up in no time. At first, she made me walk on a treadmill. Then she made me work with weights. Emily put me on a high protein and fiber diet, and I started to observe my muscle mass returning to normal. Meanwhile, the authorities were preparing a case against Greg and Laura. Jacob believed it was prudent to keep the divorce papers until she was arrested. Agent Colin Davis returned several times with state prosecutors, seeking more comprehensive information from me about the assaults. They informed me that the analysis confirmed that Dr. Victor had retrieved Greg's DNA from me. Jacob also hired a private investigator to acquire evidence of their adultery. It wasn't tough because the two of them were very open about their romance. Greg's wife, C, appeared to be unaware of their actions, as she worked nights when they messed around and slept during the day when they were at work. After gathering proof and completing the paperwork, Jacob came out to review it with me. He intended to sue for divorce on grounds of adultery, neglect, and cruelty. He had lots of images, videos, and audio evidence to back up his claim. I didn't want to hear or see what they had done, especially because I'd seen and heard enough about them to last a lifetime. He also had papers against Greg and intended to sue the firm they worked for because Laura was technically his subordinate and Greg had plainly broken company policy. Furthermore, he intended to denounce Greg to the state bar organization and had papers prepared accusing him of multiple ethics violations. I couldn't help but notice that Laura never phoned the facility or came out to see how I was doing. Apparently, she and Greg were too busy screwing about to notice me. Oh well, I figured, this too would pass. And it did. After 2 months, the authorities raided the firm and detained them. Jacob's process server was also present, delivering the paperwork to all parties involved. My lawyer even contacted the media, which obtained footage of the two cheaters being placed in the back of police cruisers. Shocked by the charges and evidence we had against Greg, the business acted fast and settled with Jacob for the majority of what we requested. They also fired both of them and reported Greg to the state bar. CE learned of the arrest that day when Greg called her from the county prison, telling her he was in jail and needed her to be in court for his arraignment so she could post bail. Agent Colin Davis met with Dr. Victor, and the three of them took me to the courthouse for my arraignment. CA noticed me as I was brought in for the hearing and ran up to me. "How is he?" she questioned Dr. Victor. I looked up to her. "Better," I replied, seeing her expression. It had been a year since she last heard me talk. "Haven't you heard? Your husband has abused me on several occasions during the last 4 months. At the same time, he has been banging Laura." "You did not know?" "Oh my God," she exclaimed. "I did not know, Ethan. Please believe me, I had no idea what was happening. I've also filed for divorce from Laura and am suing Greg for alienation of affection. If you like, I may offer you my attorney's name in case you decide to file for divorce." "Damn right. I'm divorcing the son of a," she explained. We entered the courthouse and saw the sheriffs bring Greg and Laura in, both dressed in orange jumpsuits, with their wrists and feet shackled and joined to another chain around their waists. They both looked terrible. The state prosecutor requested that both be remanded without bail, citing Greg's potential flight risk and a restraining order against Laura. He also informed the judge that I was going through medical treatment and had filed for divorce. The prosecutor expressed anxiety that Greg would physically retaliate against me. The judge reviewed the documentation in front of him and agreed, ordering them both imprisoned without bail until the hearing, which he scheduled for the following week. As they took Greg and Laura out, she noticed me seated in the back of the courtroom. Her eyes widened as I raised one hand, middle finger out. She caught up to me after Agent Colin Davis rolled me out of court. She halted them and knelt down to speak with me. Ethan, I'm really sorry about everything. I honestly didn't know. That's all right, see? I said. How long are you going to be gone? She inquired. I shrugged my shoulders. I don't know, I replied. Perhaps a couple more weeks. They actually did a great job. I can even walk around now. That's great. Please stay in touch and let me know how you're doing, CA said. I will, see, I said. We really need to go now, miss, Agent Cole stated. CA nodded and stepped up. I understand. Take care of yourself, Ethan, she said. Thanks, C, I replied as Agent Cole wheeled me to the van. When we returned to the facility, I was escorted to the physical therapy room, where Na was waiting for me. About time you showed up, she remarked. Time to begin. She pushed me through my paces and even gave me extra workouts to compensate for being late. I was sore when she finished with me, but I felt amazing. Megan stayed after dinner to check my vitals and complete her papers. When she was finished, she approached the bed, made sure I was comfortable, sat down, and looked at me for a few moments. Something appeared to be bothering her. Is everything okay? I remarked. You seem to be thinking about something. I was just wondering about something, she explained. What? Do you find me attractive? She inquired. Absolutely. I think you're a wonderful girl and an excellent nurse. Why? It's just, you haven't made a pass at me the entire time you've been here. I was wondering if I had done anything to anger you or if you didn't think me attractive. I smiled at her before replying. I'm actually very attracted to you, I told you. It's simply that, for one thing, I'm still married, and secondly, I'm relearning how to move around. I haven't been able to speak for a year. Besides, how about your other patients? You're my only patient, she explained quietly. Dr. Victor is very particular about who he assigns to the night shift. I see. So, in addition to being a medical genius and a miracle worker, Dr. Victor is also a matchmaker. She laughed at that. It has happened before, she added. Well, Megan, I tend to have a soft spot for shy, attractive redheads. And I'm getting divorced, so there's that. She grinned broadly and her eyes twinkled. Would it be okay if I kissed you goodnight? She inquired. Definitely, I said. She leaned in and softly kissed me. After a second, the delicate kiss evolved into something more sensual, with our tongues battling in one another's lips. When she broke the kiss, I felt something. I am here for you all night, every night. If you ever need anything, call me, okay? I know you're not ready to make love, but I'd love to just spend time with you, Megan murmured quietly. I will, I promise, I replied. She smiled and softly exited the room. I fell asleep thinking about what she said, with images of red-headed angels dancing through my mind all night. The next several days sped by, with Na working me even harder. I discovered that I could walk many miles on the treadmill, and my muscles had improved to the point where I could bench press more weight than ever before. The daily x-rays revealed that my replacement vertebrae were performing even better than Dr. Victor had projected, with the implants repairing nearly all of the damaged nerves. Megan kept me company most evenings by lying on the bed with me and watching television, or simply talking. We would frequently share a bowl of popcorn while watching a movie and snuggle up together, the bowl on our laps. We always finished the evening with a goodnight kiss. I began to feel like a high school boy on a date with the most attractive girl in school. On top of that, I was falling hard for her. By the time Agent Cole and Davis arrived to pick me up for the main portion of Laura and Greg's trial, I no longer required the wheelchair, but Dr. Victor insisted that I use it nevertheless to ensure that I did not injure myself. He accompanied me as well, not only as a witness to my injuries, but also to ensure that I returned home safely. I sat in my chair directly behind the prosecutor, with Dr. Victor beside me. Laura and Greg entered the room and sat down next to their defense counsel. They looked over at me before whispering to their attorney. CA sat behind them, but she didn't seem happy. The jury, which had been chosen the day before, was seated, and the judge entered with the bailiff, issuing the order for everyone to stand. Using the rail in front of me for support, I rose up and noted Greg and Laura's shocked expressions. When the judge entered, he gave the order to sit and we all sat down. Dr. Victor calmly inquired if I was all right, and I nodded yes. The judge began the hearings by reading the lengthy list of allegations, noting that Greg and Laura had both pleaded not guilty. After both sides had finished their opening comments, the court went to the prosecution attorney, who called me as his first witness. Dr. Victor walked beside me to ensure I didn't collapse and then returned to his seat. Greg and Laura exchanged stunned looks as I sat in the witness chair. They were even more surprised when I talked after the bailiff had sworn me in to tell the truth. The prosecutor got up and walked up to me. He started by complimenting me on my improvement, then asked questions about my accident and the year I spent as a quadriplegic. I realized what he was doing. By asking these questions, he was informing the jury about my physical state before I was treated at Dr. Victor's facility. The majority of the inquiries at this point were on my home life. How Laura tried but was unable to care for me, and how she was able to arrange for home health care experts to care for me during the day. And during any of this time, did your wife ever attempt to see to your emotional needs? The prosecuting attorney questioned. No, sir, I said. Did she ever attempt to please you in any way? He asked her. No, she did not, I replied. Had she tried, would she have been successful? Wondered the man. I shake my head. No, I had no feeling from the neck down. I see, he replied. Did she ever hug you or kiss you or spend time with you, maybe reading a book or watching television? I considered my response carefully, but I couldn't recall her doing anything similar. She sometimes gave me a peck on the cheek, but that was about it, I replied. Did she participate in your care? He inquired. Did she feed you, help bathe you, perhaps help you in the bathroom? She tried at first, but she simply wasn't up to it. When did Mr. Wallace come into the picture? Almost from the beginning, I said. Were you friends before your accident? The prosecutor inquired. Yes, we were. They lived next door to us and we had spent time together before to my injury. I see. So you weren't surprised to see him in your apartment? No, I thought we were friendly. They frequently came over, and we would occasionally enjoy a beverage or dinner. You say he and your wife engaged in inappropriate activity in your apartment, the prosecution continued. When did that start? I'm not sure exactly. They could have been doing it while I was in the hospital, but I'm not sure. I have no confirmation of that. He frequently let her cry on his shoulder while they were both present. I believe it was approximately a month after I returned home from the hospital that I first heard them. Heard them? The prosecutor inquired. Yes. I could hear them kissing and moaning like they were making out. Laura wiped her eyes as I recounted what I had heard. Then I heard them in what used to be our bed, being intimate. What happened then? The prosecutor inquired. He would enter my room and harass me when she was showering. One day, he brought in a monitor in a box and said that it was so I could see a real man with my wife. Laura and the jurors let out a collective gasp. Your Honor, the prosecutor remarked as the bailiff brought out a trolley containing a large monitor and a black box into the courtroom. This is the monitor and box Mr. John is talking about. The box is a digital video recorder. The system also includes 2 video cameras, one in Mr. John's master bedroom and the other in his lodging room. We copied several hours of video footage captured by the device. The prosecutor turned back to face me. Is it your testimony that Mr. Wallace used this so you could watch him being intimate with your wife? He was asking. Yes, I said gently. Laura looked at Greg, astonished. You liar, she exclaimed. The judge hammered the gavel. Order in the court, he declared. Laura calmed down, and the prosecutor resumed. Did you know that Mr. Wallace placed a camera in your room as well as the master bedroom? My friend asked me. I shake my head. This was new to me. No, sir, I didn't. How did your wife react to this monitor? The prosecution inquired. She thought it was great that he got it for me. Apparently, she assumed it was so I could watch sports on TV. And was it about this time that the abuse against you began? The prosecutor inquired. Yes, it was, I answered. Please tell the court what would typically happen, the prosecution asked. After Greg and my wife had their fun, he would come into my room, turn the monitor off, then lift me up and abuse me. Is it in your testimony that he abused you? The prosecutor inquired. Yes, I said, embarrassed. Was your wife ever present when this occurred? The prosecutor inquired. Not that I'm aware of. He always appeared to finish around the time she was done showering. Afterward, Mom would come into my room and tell me how great it was to have a friend like Greg to look after me. How often did this happen? About 2 or 3 times a week, I answered. For how long? The prosecutor inquired. About 4 months. I heard members of the jury gasp, and when I looked around, I noticed several of them staring at Laura and Greg with venom in their eyes. Laura looked down at the table, while Greg sat stoically, staring straight ahead. So you estimate that this happened about 35 times overall? The prosecutor inquired. About that, yes, I replied. Were you aware that Mr. Wallace recorded his time in your room? My friend asked me. I shake my head. No, I wasn't. The prosecutor looked at the jurors. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wallace recorded himself abusing Mr. John 36 times on this device. he told them. He paused while the jurors took it in. With friends like that, who needs enemies? The prosecutor remarked rhetorically. The defense attorney objected, and the judge upheld his objection. That's all I have for this witness at this time, the prosecution stated. But I reserve the right to recall Mr. John to the stand. Very well, the judge replied. Your witness, Mr. Bradley, he informed the defense attorney. Brad Bradley remained at his table, looking up at me before speaking. Mr. John, I am sorry to hear of your injuries, and I do hope you get better. Thank you, I replied. Just one thing, he added. At any time, did you ever indicate to Mr. Wallace that you did not approve of his alleged actions? I was unable to. I was totally crippled at the time, and I couldn't even speak. So the answer is no then? He asked. That's because I couldn't, I explained, growing agitated. You also failed to alert anyone about what transpired, including your wife. Isn't that correct? He questioned. Now I was upset. That's because I was completely disabled and couldn't, I roared and slammed my fist on the thick wood rail in front of me. For a moment, no one said or did anything. When I drew my hand away, I noticed that I had cracked the rail. I didn't realize I'd hit it so hard. I looked at the judge before speaking. I apologize, Your Honor. I lost my temper. Don't do it again, he told me. I nodded my head. That's all I have for this witness, Bradley added. The judge told me I may leave the stand, and Dr. Victor came to accompany me back to my seat. The prosecutor then summoned Dr. Victor to the stand. He informed the court of my injuries and the extent of my incapacity. He also said that he discovered severe damage, collected samples for evidence and testing, and then did everything he could to repair the harm. He also discussed the procedure he had conducted and my progress since then. And in your professional opinion, the only way for this damage to have been done is for Mr. John to have been abused, is that right? The prosecutor inquired. Correct, Dr. Victor said. That would also explain the presence of evidence. Thank you, the prosecutor responded. He turned to face the jurors. Ladies and gentlemen, the state tested the sample. Further tests and DNA analysis have proven with 99.99% certainty that it belongs to the defendant, Greg Wallace. He turned to face the judge. That is all I have for this witness, Your Honor. Your witness, Mr. Bradley, the court stated. Thank you. Dr. Victor, you run the Arrowhead Institute of Advanced Medical Research, correct? Yes, that is correct, Dr. Victor replied. You engage in some pretty cutting-edge research there, do you not? Bradley asked. Sure, Dr. Victor replied, slipping into his native German as he occasionally did. Bradley took out a piece of paper and started reading. Each of us has different protection mechanisms that assist us deal with harsh events. Sometimes we revert to an alternate version of ourselves, which could be regarded as an alter ego. The alter ego could present itself in a variety of ways. An otherwise calm, unassuming person may suddenly become noisy, arrogant, and domineering, for example. Those who are unfamiliar with that person's behavior will have a very different opinion of him or her, he read before returning his gaze to Dr. Victor. You also talk of an inner beast that is dormant within every one of us. According to your writings, you claim to have discovered a means to unleash the so-called beast to assist with a certain scenario. Is that correct? He questioned. I did write that, and yes, my research has found that to be the case, replied the doctor. Isn't it true that you once worked with Mr. Bill Dalton to help him discover his purported inner beast? Bradley explained that simply saying yes or no would suffice. I worked with Mr. Dalton, yes, Dr. Victor said. The exact nature of my work, however, is a matter of doctor-patient confidentiality. Is it not true that toward the end of his treatment Mr. Dalton's house mysteriously blew up? Bradley asked. The prosecutor quickly protested. Irrelevant, Your Honor. Your Honor, Bradley explained, we all saw Mr. John's reaction. If you'll allow me, I believe there is a connection. I'll allow it for the time being, Mr. Bradley, the judge remarked. But I would appreciate it if you could make your point and move on. I will, Your Honor. Thank you, Bradley replied. He turned back to Dr. Victor. Are you aware of what happened to Mr. Dalton's home? Bradley asked. I remember seeing something about it on the news, Dr. Victor remarked. I also recall the police claiming that Mrs. Dalton and her live-in partner were manufacturing medicines with highly volatile materials. I don't see any relation to this situation. According to police reports, Mrs. Dalton was seen running out of the house screaming about a monster, Bradley recalled. Apparently a result of the drugs she and her lover were manufacturing, remarked Victor's doctor. Your Honor, this is absolutely irrelevant to the case before the court today, as Mr. Bradley is fully aware. I insist that this line of questioning be stopped, the prosecutor stated. I tend to agree. Mr. Bradley, I've been more than fair. Please move on. Very well, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness, Bradley stated. The judge dismissed Dr. Victor, and the case continued. The prosecutor summoned state agents, who searched my residence. Both claimed they discovered what looked to be proof of abuse. Then he called home healthcare nurses, who testified that they saw symptoms of physical abuse. They documented it in their records, but the home care facility never followed up, thus the reports fell through the bureaucratic cracks. I have one last piece of evidence, Your Honor, the prosecutor stated. With your permission, I would like to play a portion of video taken of the abuse against Mr. John. Very well, the judge replied. The prosecutor looked at the jurors. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to show you is shocking, he told them. I take no joy in this, but I believe it's necessary that you see for yourselves what Mr. John had to endure for months on end. He switched on the monitor and started playing the footage. The jury frowned as they saw Greg clearly abuse me. The prosecutor paused the video and enlarged the image. Ladies and gentlemen, let there be no doubt in your mind who is committing this heinous act to a man who once thought of him as a friend, he told the audience. After the jurors looked at the image for a few moments, tears streamed down my cheeks from shame. Again, the prosecutor paused the video. He stared at the stunned jurors. I rest my case, he stated with distaste. Mr. Bradley, you may present your case, the judge instructed once the prosecutor sat down. Bradley stood up and summoned Laura to the stand. Mrs. John, he asked, is it true that you had an affair with Mr. Wallace? Yes, it is, she replied calmly. Can you tell us why? He inquired. My husband, Ethan, was injured so badly, and I felt lost and hopeless, she told me. He was there when I needed someone to weep on. Yes, we had an affair, but it was nothing more. Were you aware of what Mr. Wallace did to your husband? Bradley asked. No, I wasn't. If you had known, would you have done anything to stop him? Bradley asked. Yes, I would have. Thank you, Mrs. John. That's it for now. Your witness, Mr. Foster, he remarked while sitting down. The prosecutor stood up and approached the monitor. He selected an image from the video that clearly showed both my face and Laura in the same frame. Mrs. John, he started, you testified that you were unaware your husband was being abused. Is this correct? Yes. Look at his face in that video, the prosecutor added. The hurt and humiliation were clear to everybody who saw it. Do you expect this court to think that you could look at your husband of 3 years in that state and not notice something was wrong? It didn't cross my mind at the time, she told me. Before Mrs. Wallace brought healthcare workers into the home, did you ever once feed or clean your husband? The defense attorney said. I tried, but I wasn't very good at it, she stated. What happens afterward? Did you even try to help? No, she replied gently. And why was that? The prosecutor inquired. I do not know. I felt Greg was helping him, and I had no idea what to do. The truth is, you basically abandoned him, didn't you? Bradley responded to the prosecutor's query with an objection. I withdraw the question, Foster promptly said. You said your affair with Mr. Wallace was purely physical, correct? That's right, she replied. And you claimed in your testimony that you still love your husband, right? Yes, she answered. Foster returned to his table, pulling out an audio recorder and a document from his briefcase. He walked back to the bench. Your Honor, this is a written report done by Samuel Jenkins, a private investigator hired by Mr. John's attorney, he stated, presenting the paper to the judge. A copy of this report and the audio were provided to Mr. Bradley, as evidenced by the accompanying affidavit. The report refers to an audio recording of a conversation between the defendants while out on a dinner date shortly after Mr. John was admitted to Arrowhead. With your permission, I'd like to play the audio for the jury. Very well, the judge replied. Foster activated the recording button, and Laura and Greg's chat could be heard in court. So have you given any thought to what we discussed? Greg's voice is heard on the recording. I have, and I admit I'm intrigued, Laura replied. Well, what do you think? I must admit, the last few months with you have been fantastic, she remarked in the recording. Much better than my life with Ethan has ever been. Are you sure we can pull this off? Of course, Greg replied. I'm a lawyer, you know. I can have a judge do whatever I want. It would be easy to declare Ethan a state ward. He can't care for himself, and you're clearly not trained to do so. Frankly, I can't stomach the idea of it, she told me. I mean, feeding him like a baby, wiping his drool, changing his diaper and cleaning his buttocks, yuck. It makes me nauseous just to think about it. I need a man, a whole man, A genuine man like you. You and I both know this Victor guy won't be able to do anything for him, Greg told him. Every doctor stated he'd be an invalid for the rest of his life. Once he is judged incompetent, we may seize his massive settlement and live like kings in Costa Rica or somewhere else. Wouldn't that be preferable to staying here and wiping the excrement off little Timmy? Yeah, it would, she answered. What about C though? Laura asked. Things haven't been great between us for a long time, Greg told me. She wants children, but I don't, and I'm tired of her continual pestering. I just want to be sure you won't go soft on me and tell me you still love him when we start dating. That will not happen. I love only you. The prosecutor paused the recording and looked at Laura. I felt like my heart had been ripped out again. So you and your lover intended to declare your spouse incompetent so that you could take his settlement money and go to Costa Rica? So were you telling the truth to your sweetheart or in court? Which is it, Mrs. John? Please tell me now so that I can decide whether or not to prosecute you with perjury. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she was forced to openly confront her own deception. I don't know, she exclaimed. I still loved him, but I loved Greg too. She looked over at me. Please, Ethan, forgive me. I shook my head, turning away from her. Foster glanced at her with disgust. I'm done with this witness, he stated before walking away. The court excused her and Bradley summoned Greg to the stand. So Mr. Wallace, Bradley said when Greg was sworn in, we've seen video of you and Mr. John. There is no denying what we all witnessed. I only have one question. Did Mr. John ever tell you that he didn't approve of your actions? Not once, Greg answered with a snarl. Thank you, Bradley replied, turning away. Your witness, he informed Foster, who was already on his feet. Mr. Wallace, he said. You graduated from Harvard Law School, did you not? Yes, I did, Greg announced happily. And you graduated near the top of your class, didn't you? I did. In fact, you're highly regarded as a top litigator in your firm, Foster told me. Bradley objected. Relevance, Your Honor? Your Honor, I intend to show that Mr. Wallace not only knows the law, but he knew that Mr. John could not possibly have given consent, Foster told you. Go ahead, Mr. Foster, the judge instructed. Thank you. He turned back to Greg. You knew that Mr. John was disabled, didn't you? Greg sighed and said nothing. Didn't you? Foster bellowed. Yes, I knew, Greg said. And you knew that the law in this state says persons with Mr. John's disabilities are incapable of giving consent, didn't you? Foster inquired. Yes, I guess so, Greg said. Foster glanced at him with hatred for a few moments before shaking his head. I'm finished with this witness, Foster replied, walking away. Any more witnesses, Mr. Bradley? The court inquired. Bradley shakes his head. No, Your Honor, I rest my case. Very well, we'll take 15 minutes and reconvene to hear closing arguments. The judge pounded his gavel and everyone exited the courtroom. Dr. Victor gave me a cup of water. How are you holding up? He inquired as I sipped my water. I'll be okay, I assured him. He patted my shoulder. Good. Foster looked to check how I was doing. I'm sorry you had to relive all of that, he said. I believe we have made an impression on the jurors. We will see. This is nearly over, Ethan. Remain patient. Thanks, I replied. Soon, the break was finished, and everyone returned to the courtroom. Greg, Laura, and Mr. Bradley appeared less assured than they had earlier in the day. CA looked angry enough to spit nails. This was the first time she'd heard much about it. When the judge returned, the bailiff directed everyone to stand. All right, Mr. Bradley, present your closing statement, the court said. Bradley stood forward to face the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a difficult case for all of us. And contrary to popular belief, we hope Mr. John recovers. We have stipulated that the alleged abuse occurred with Mr. John. We're not debating that point, but this is a case about consent, or lack thereof. Mr. John confessed under oath that he never told my client that he did not provide approval. Mrs. John was unaware that anything was amiss, and she had no idea the alleged abuse had occurred. As a result, you are forced to conclude that my clients are not guilty. Thank you. He took a seat. The judge moved for Foster to make his final statements. On his way, Foster turned on the monitor, which displayed the image of Greg abusing me. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your participation today. I realize this has been really difficult for all of you. The defense has attempted to avoid the issue by stating that Mr. John never stated that he did not consent to what was being done to him. There's only one problem. Mr. John is crippled. He could not speak or defend himself. According to the law in this state, people with disabilities like his are unable to give or deny consent. Mr. Bradley is aware of this, as is the defendant, Greg Wallace, who is a Harvard Law School graduate. They have admitted to the activities against Mr. John. You've seen the video and heard the audio. You know the defendants plan to fraudulently declare Mr. John incapable in order to grab what was rightfully his and depart the country. Wallace took Mr. John's wife with the intention of taking Mr. John's money while leaving his own wife high and dry. You have heard the defendants' plan and scheme against Mr. John. The defense has not raised any doubts about what happened. The defendant Wallace abused Mr. John 36 times, and Mrs. John did nothing to stop it. In this state, abuse and willful neglect of a disabled person is considered a hate crime. That is why I am advocating for the highest punishment permitted by law. The state has done its part, now I ask that you do yours and give Mr. John the justice he deserves. Thank you. After Foster had taken his seat, the judge issued his orders to the jury and sent them off to deliberate. He then ordered the rest of the court to recess. Dr. Victor and I entered the corridor, where Jacob waited. I just wanted to let you know that Laura signed the divorce papers, he told me. She isn't contesting anything. I just came back from filing them. The judge will sign off on them in a day or two, and you will be free in 6 months. Free? I asked cynically. Why don't I feel free then? You've been through a lot, young man, Dr. Victor explained. Trust me, it'll get better. I hope so. And I think I know just the person who can help you feel better, the doctor added with a knowing smile. You mean Megan? I inquired. Dr. Victor grinned and nodded. Ja, he answered. She really likes you, you know. It was my turn to smile. I like her too, a lot. Good, Dr. Victor replied. Just be careful though, I don't want you to have sex for at least another 6 to 8 weeks. I don't want you to put too much strain on your back just yet, he said with a smile. By the way, I said, what's up with that rail? How did I crack that thing? I barely slapped it. Must be the supplements we've been giving you, he said with a joke. That and Na's physical therapy. Nothing to do with that inner beast stuff, I said. He laughed. No, not at all. That's an entirely separate project. Besides, I would not recommend it for you, especially with the custom-built vertebrae we've installed. We talked for a little longer, and after about an hour, Foster poked his head into the corridor. Jury's back in already? I asked. He nodded his head. That was fast. Yeah, it was, Foster replied. Hopefully that's good news for us. We went through the motions again as everyone returned to the courtroom. The bailiff directed us all to stand as the judge entered, and we all took our seats. On his signal, the judge inquired, has the jury reached a decision? We have, the jury foreman said. The bailiff received the paperwork from the foreman and delivered it to the judge. After reading it to himself, he told Laura and Greg to stand up. Bradley stood with them. How do you find the charges against defendant Greg Wallace? The judge inquired. We find the defendant Greg Wallace guilty on all charges, the foreman stated. And on the charges against defendant Laura John, how do you find? We find the defendant Laura John not guilty on the charge of accessory to abuse of a disabled person, Your Honor, and guilty on all the other charges, said the deputy district attorney. The judge nodded his head. Very well, he responded, facing the defendants. He poured his rage on them. I've seen and heard a lot in this courtroom over the years, but nothing as awful and egregious as what I observed here today. The two of you make me sick to my stomach. You have not only mocked your marriages, but also the legal profession. That is why I am handing you the maximum penalty permitted by law. Mr. Wallace, as a well-trained lawyer and court official, your actions disgust me beyond words. At the prosecutor's request, I am sentencing you to at least 450 years of hard labor. That's 12 years for each of the 36 charges of maltreatment, plus an additional 20 years for committing a hate crime. I additionally added 8 years for conspiracy to conduct fraud. Mrs. John, I disagree with the jury's not guilty finding. Personally, I don't understand how anyone with more than 2 brain cells could be unaware that your husband was being abused. Nonetheless, I shall follow the verdict. I am, however, giving you the maximum punishment for criminal negligence and conspiracy to conduct fraud, which is 15 years in jail under state rules, making you available for parole in 10 years. He raised his gavel, but Bradley spoke to the judge. Your Honor, he replied, Mrs. John has just informed me that divorce papers have been filed, and she wishes to speak with Mr. John before being taken into custody. Is that acceptable with you, Mr. John? I can give her a couple of minutes, the judge explained. Your Honor, that's fine, I said. The judge nodded and remarked, very well. He slammed his gavel, declaring the court dismissed. Laura approached me as deputies prepared to take Greg away. You look good, she replied. Thank you, I replied. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything. I honestly had no idea what he was doing to you. I would have done everything I could to stop it if I had known. I think you convinced the jury of that, I told them. I agree with the judge, however. I find it difficult to believe. You are not a foolish woman. At any rate, you'll have 15 years to consider it. Was there anything else? Yes, she responded. I wanted you to know I signed the divorce papers and I'm not going to fight you over it. That's what I heard, I informed her. Don't you want to know why it happened? She inquired. I shook my head. I really don't care, I told her. I'm sure it was all for greed and lust. You cheated me, plain and simple. The why really doesn't matter anymore. Do you think you could ever forgive me? She asked. Why is it all you cheating losers think you can come crawling and begging for forgiveness? I asked. You certainly didn't care about me when I needed you the most. To answer your question, no. I do not intend to ever forgive you. Instead, I'll do my best to forget you exist. Was there anything else? I know you won't believe me, but I do love you, she replied. I just wanted to tell you that before they take me to jail. You're correct, I don't believe you, but thank you for saying so. I suppose you should get moving. Those deputies don't seem happy over there. Okay. Goodbye, Ethan, she replied. She walked away with tears in her eyes. At that moment, I had absolutely no feelings for her. As I stood up, she approached me. How are you doing, Ethan? You look better now than you have in a long time. Thanks. I'm doing a lot better now, thanks to Dr. Victor. I just wanted to apologize for what my loser soon-to-be ex-husband did to you. I appreciate that, I told her. Did you get in touch with Jacob? Yes, I did. Greg's father insisted on a prenuptial agreement when we married, and it includes a very strict infidelity clause, so Jacob will have a field day with it. I'm glad to hear it, I said. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. Thanks. I might need to borrow several copies of those videos from you. No problem, I responded. Whatever you need. I'll be gone a little longer, but I'm sure Jacob can make do with what he already has. One last thing, she added. I still have the key you gave me right after the accident. I'll clean up your apartment and remove Laura's belongings if you like. That would be a big help, see. Thanks. Not a problem. Good luck, and I'll see you soon, she said, kissing me on the cheek. We watched as she departed. I couldn't believe Greg was so dumb to cheat on such a nice woman. Are you finished flirting with all the women? Dr. Victor inquired. I'd like to get back to work if you don't mind. Works for me, I replied. But how are we going to get back? No problem, we'll take care of that for you, Agent Cole stated from behind. After all, we're the ones who brought you here at Dr. Victor's insistence. I sat down in the wheelchair, and Cole drove me out to the car, where we all climbed in. Actually, I was relieved to have the wheelchair. I'd been up and down much of the day and was feeling fatigued and achy. We returned to the facility, and Dr. Victor wheeled me into my room, where Megan waited for me. After supper, she helped me get ready for bed before going into the bathroom to change into her sleepwear, which was actually a long t-shirt. How are you feeling? She inquired as she slid into bed with me, wiped out. It's been a long day, I explained. She kissed me and rested her head against my shoulder. Yes, it has, she replied. I realize it has been difficult, but it had to be done. Now you can start putting all of that behind you, and I'll be here to assist you in any way I can. Before I spoke, I took a long look at her face. I said, I love you, Megan, without thinking. She smiled softly and kissed my lips. And I love you, Ethan, she added. She rested her head on my shoulder and draped an arm across my chest. I felt happier than I had been in a long time. We soon fell asleep together. They exhausted me over the next 5 weeks. In drill instructor mode, encouraged me to go farther and quicker with each session. On top of that, I was seeing the counselor twice a week to help me overcome the trauma I had experienced the previous year. Every day, they took x-rays to determine the condition of my spine. Megan stayed every night in my bed and we grew to know each other rather well. Finally, Dr. Victor said that I had recovered sufficiently to be sent home. By then, my body was in better shape than it had ever been, but doctor told me to avoid strenuous exertion for another 3 weeks. He also scheduled me to come in twice a month for the following year so they could check my back. I was eager to get home, but I also knew I'd miss Megan. On the day I was supposed to leave, I wrote her a note in which I expressed my feelings for her. I also offered her to come visit me whenever she wanted. I finished the note as Dr. Victor entered my room in a wheelchair. I stared at him, puzzled. After all, I could already walk on my own. He shrugged his shoulders. Regulations, he stated. I understand. As I sat in the wheelchair, I wished I'd never have to use one again. He pushed me to the pickup location outside and I glanced about while waiting for the Arrowhead van. Instead, I noticed a dark blue Toyota RAV4 pulling up. The driver's side door opened, revealing Megan, my red-headed angel of compassion. She came around to open the passenger door for me. Surprised, I stared at Dr. Victor. Megan has a new assignment, he announced with a smile. She'll be your live-in caretaker, that is, unless you have any objections. Absolutely not, I answered, smiling. I shook his hand. Thank you, Dr. Victor, for everything. You're welcome, he replied with a smile. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. He stared at Megan. Please take care of our boy, okay? I will, she replied with a smile. After assisting me inside, she got into the automobile. I noticed numerous luggage had been stuffed into the back of the car. So how long are you going to be assigned to me? I asked. It depends on how long you need me. How long do you think that will be? Conservative estimate. I would say at least 60 years, I responded. Is that okay with you? Darn straight it is, I replied. She kissed me on the lips before pulling away and heading home. When we went home, I marked the calendar with the day Dr. Victor indicated I could resume normal activities. As it turned out, that was the day after my divorce from Laura was finalized. CEA met and married a doctor 2 years after her divorce. I never visited Laura in prison, but I did understand that she was undergoing treatment. After 15 years, she was freed on parole and worked as a server at a truck stop cafe on the highway. Megan and I married around 6 months after my divorce was finalized, which was a good thing because she told me a few weeks after we returned from our honeymoon that we were expecting children. We had 2 more children after that and felt that was sufficient for the time being. Our love for one another remained strong, and when our youngest child departed for college, we celebrated with an around-the-world trip. Even after all these years, she remains my gorgeous red-headed angel of mercy. My vertebrae strengthened, and it appeared that I was in better shape than I had ever been. The implants also worked, and all of the nerve damage I had sustained from the accident was reversed. Dr. Victor successfully repeated the operation multiple times over the next 10 years, and the treatment is now awaiting final approval. As I reflect on my life, I can't help but think of John Milton's quote, "Every cloud has a silver lining." Yes, I went through hell for a year after that truck hit me. It was my dark cloud. But what I have today is better than any silver lining. Am I the asshole for going low contact with my parents after they hit a hereditary illness, putting my child at risk? Edit, most of you figured it out anyway. It is called Huntington's. Update, I ended up telling my siblings. We met at my sister's house, and I just came out with, I have Huntington's. It's hereditary. You should both get checked. My brother started panicking. He and his fiancée just started trying to get pregnant, and now he's terrified. He's furious with our parents and fully on my side. He confronted them right after, and now we're both going low contact. My sister was more shocked and distant, but she said she'll get tested. My parents are pissed that I told them without waiting for the right time, but I don't regret it. My siblings deserve the truth, and I wasn't going to let them live in ignorance like I did. I, 28F, recently found out I have a serious hereditary illness that's going to screw up my life, and I am so mad I can barely type this out. It's a degenerative illness, no cure, nothing. My body's just gonna slowly get worse. And the kicker, my parents have known this could happen my whole life and never said a damn word. This illness runs in my family. My dad's mom had it. His sister, my aunt, died from it a few years ago. I was living overseas when she passed, and my parents told me it was cancer. Cancer. They lied right to my face. It wasn't until I got diagnosed that they finally came clean and admitted she had the same illness I do. When I confronted them, my dad wouldn't even give me a straight answer. I asked if he had it too and he dodged every single question, acting like I was overreacting. My mom, on the other hand, tried to justify it by saying they didn't want me living in fear. Are you kidding me? I could have been prepared. Instead, they chose to let me walk into this blind. And here's where it gets worse. I have a 2-year-old son. My child might have this, and they never told me I was at risk. I could have had him tested, made informed decisions, anything. But no, they took that from me and now I live in constant fear for him too. Then my mom had the nerve to ask me if I would have rather not been born than deal with this. Can you believe that? She turned it around on me, like I'm the monster for even thinking about it. And you know what? Yes, I said it. Yes, I would rather not have been born than deal with this disease. They made a selfish choice, and now I'm paying for it. They knew the risks and did it anyway, for themselves. They wanted kids, and now I'm stuck with this. I called them selfish, and I meant every word. Now they're begging me not to tell my younger siblings. They don't know about this yet, haven't been tested, and my parents want to keep it that way. They're hoping they'll get lucky, but I'm not going to lie to them. I refuse to let them be blindsided like I was. They deserve to know the truth. I've been in low contact with my parents. I can't stand to even think about them right now. My mom keeps trying to guilt trip me, saying they were just trying to protect me. Protect me from what? The truth? No, they weren't protecting me. They were protecting themselves, from the guilt of knowing they passed this on, and now they want me to protect them too. But I won't. I love my son and my siblings too much to lie to them, AITA for going LC and refusing to keep their secret, even though they claim they were just trying to protect me. Am I the asshole for making a joke about my kid that accidentally triggered my friend's marriage breakdown and caused drama at an engagement party? So, me and my wife have a 5-year-old son. Our group of friends is mostly couples with kids as we are nearing our 40s, and so a lot of our meetings with friends now include meeting up as entire families, kids included. This can sometimes mean a lot of adults and a lot of kids. One person in this group, Emma, fake name, used to be my roommate in college. She was married and has her own kids, and we hang out with her and her husband sometimes in a group setting, but rarely on our own. Emma also tends to run late, often. This is all relevant to the story. As our son is an only child, we sometimes worry that he wouldn't really learn to share or get along with other kids. To prevent this, and while I love spending time with him, I would sometimes preemptively nudge him to engage with other kids when we are in public playgrounds or at the beach or the pool. To that end, when I buy him a water pistol or an RC car or the like, I'd often just buy 2 or 3. I'd get to the playground and play with him, and when another kid would show interest in the toys, I'd just go, "Oh, you want to play with us?" and hand him the remote or the pistol or whatever, thus getting the kids to play. This works great quite often, and I have a generally good relationship with the parents in our neighborhood. This is also relevant. One day, like a year back, me and my wife were planning on taking our kid to the pool. I pack my large bag of pool toys. Emma texts me, her husband is away that day and she's looking for something to do with the kids. I talk to my wife and tell Emma we're going to our local pool and she's welcome to join us, but we're planning on heading there early, so she can just join us whenever. We arrive at the pool pretty early and get a really good spot poolside, right by the shallows. I grab some water pistols and me and my kids start playing world domination. I am trying to take over the world and can only be stopped through the power of water pistols. It's a whole thing, kid loves it. Soon another kid is there. It's a kid from my son's kindergarten class. He's there with his mom. He is of course welcome to join us. We know the family, the mom and my wife are pretty friendly and our kids play together often. So my wife says she wants to go for a swim, and the kid's mom says she wants to join her, and asks me if I'm okay watching the kids. I say sure, since by this point the kids are blasting each other with water pistols and I'm just chillin' poolside, just occasionally having to call out, "Oh no, my plans for world domination, ruined." Because sometimes that's just what parenting is. Then Emma and her kids show up. She is really happy to see me and I give out toys to her kids. All is going well. Then my son's friend runs up and asks for some other toy and I go sure thing and hand it to him. Emma goes, "Oh my God, so cute. He looks just like you." I laugh and say, "Okay cool, but this isn't my kid." Now, in her defense, the kid does look kinda like me, making this kinda hilarious. When my wife and the kid's mom come back, I tell them this story. They also find it hilarious. We all have a friendly chuckle but think little of it. Fast forward to a few months ago. I haven't seen Emma in a while. We were at a friends group gathering, and it was a good time all around. When we're about to call it a day, me and Emma are at the entrance. She's grabbing her stuff and I'm on my second trip from the car. Kids' toys, kids' clothes, dirty dishes, Tupperware with leftovers I want, etc. And I call out to Emma's husband. "Hey, can you call my wife and kid over? Just make sure it's actually my kid and not some random kid who kinda looks like me." I think it's a hilarious callback. He seems confused and kinda angry. He asks what the hell I'm talking about. Why would he call a random kid? I'm also confused, so I tell him the pool story. He doesn't laugh. Emma doesn't laugh either. The entire thing now feels kinda awkward. I awkwardly say goodbye, go grab my wife and kid myself, and we leave. Later that day I text Emma to ask if everything is alright. I get no reply. I will text again a few days later. No reply. I get the distinct sense I fucked up, but also if she doesn't want to talk to me, I'm not gonna force the issue. I leave well enough alone. At worst I thought she was mad at a joke I made which was apparently in poor taste. Boy howdy did I underestimate the fallout of this joke. A few days ago I arrived at a friend's place and she's there. This is an engagement party, so no kids. I wasn't supposed to come but decided at the last minute, and my wife was at home with our kid. Emma sees me and is livid. She wasn't expecting to. She only came because she thought I wouldn't be here. She does, however, take the opportunity to tear me a new one though. She calls me out in front of everyone. Because of my joke, originally said with air quotes, her husband was furious. From what she said and what I gathered from mutual friends afterwards, she previously commented on someone else's kid looking like someone who wasn't his father. Except that whole thing led to family drama in Emma's husband's family because in that case that dude was cheating and that was his kid and a whole bunch of people were really hurt in the aftermath. Emma's husband was furious because he apparently thought she would know better than to comment on kids looking like people again. This sent them down a spiral, especially because the husband apparently thought she told me that other family story, and that I was mocking him for his family drama, and he thought the story I told was just covering for her when I realized I fucked up. This was not the case. I had no idea that whole thing happened. Still, he didn't believe Emma when she told him. So they are now separated. She calls me an asshole and says I ruined her marriage. I am not a confrontational person. I apologize profusely. I say I didn't know and if she didn't want me telling the story she should have said something. She tells me I'm making excuses. This is now a scene. I apologize profusely again and leave quickly after telling the couple a quick congratulations. I am later told this was anything anyone could talk about at the party and now the engaged couple are mad at me too. Emma is even more mad because now everyone knows her drama. I am unfriended and unfollowed on everything. Some friends think I couldn't have known better and the joke was pretty benign. Other friends say it was in really poor taste to throw her under the bus and I'm totally the asshole. Emma's best friend, who I also know from college, thinks I did know about the thing with her husband, and now I'm just covering my own ass to get away with being cruel. It has been a few days and some of my friends will no longer talk to me. Others think she is wrong to blame me and that marriage was doomed anyway. Still, I feel really guilty about making the joke, and I obviously wouldn't have made it had I known the trouble it would cause. I like Emma, and I didn't want to hurt her. I also liked her husband. I'd like to say that maybe he was wrong to let the marriage implode like that because of a stupid joke, but at the same time I don't exactly know his family drama and their history, nor the specifics of his relationship with Emma, so I can't really say he's wrong or overreacting. The entire thing just kinda sucks. My wife sorta got my back though. She thinks the joke was hilarious, and actually thinks me breaking up their marriage makes it even funnier, because WTF. She also loves crazy Reddit stories so she sent me to post this. So at least I got that going for me, which is nice. So. Aida? TL daughter? My friend accidentally said someone else's kid looks like me. I later made a joke about this in front of her husband. Turns out she said something like that before and it destroyed their marriage. She confronted me at an engagement party, and apparently I ruined that too. Aida? Update. I am now updating you because the last few hours have been a lot. It turns out that when I wrote my post I left out one critical piece of context. I thought I was a regular person living a normal life. Turns out I am Chaz, a side character on the worst Gossip Girl episode ever written. So after posting yesterday, reading replies and thinking it over, I decided to reach out to Emma one final time. Some of you thought I shouldn't and that these were, in fact, not my monkeys. Others made me realize that Emma was probably in a shitty situation with her husband and his family and was actively being gaslit. Now, of note here, while as I mentioned we're not as close as we used to be very close. She helped me pick out a spot and let me borrow her car for my first date with who later became my wife. She was a significant part of my support system during some very rough times in my life. Despite everything, I still felt like I cared about her and wanted to work things out. This is no longer the case. See, from my perspective, I thought we were good friends, then when she met her husband we naturally drifted apart, and then this thing happened out of nowhere. This was not what it looked like from her perspective. How do I know? Well, buckle up because this is absolutely unhinged. So last night, before going to bed, I texted her a long thoughtful message. I explained that I do apologize for the part I played in ruining her marriage, and I understand she is going through a tough time. I understand if she wants nothing more to do with me, but if and when she feels she wants to talk it out, she's welcome to reach out, and I leave the ball in her court. I show this to my wife and she is practically giddy. She tells me there is no way this shit doesn't blow up in my face and I should have just cut my losses, like many of y'all said. Emma shows up at my house at around 7 a.m. unannounced. I ask WTF. She says she really needs to talk to me. I call my wife to the door and explain this. She sends me off with this woman because she understands this shit can only go poorly and apparently she is here for it and it's my own fault at this point. So as I said, from my perspective we were friends, we drifted apart. From her perspective, for the last 15 years she has been playing some weird game of 4 days chess. Or, 2 different games of 4 days chess. Apparently she had feelings for me back in college, and she was trying to nice girl her way into a relationship with me. By being there for me when my dad died, and when I was struggling with being single. She always gave everything because she just assumed I would, at some point, come around. You'd think that me getting married or her getting married would change that. And it did, just badly. Apparently her husband knew about her feelings, which is why he always kept me at a distance. We never drifted apart, he explicitly asked her not to meet with me anymore outside of large social gatherings. That day at the pool? Yeah, that was her sticking it to him, because he was away cheating on her or something. And he didn't like her hanging around me scantily clad. It wasn't just that he was upset at the joke, he was upset because apparently I was having an affair with his wife and rubbing it in his face. Makes no sense. I know. It gets worse. That thing at the wedding? Well, at least she didn't plan that. I told our friends getting engaged that I wasn't coming. She asked and verified this. She wasn't expecting to see me and they told her I wouldn't be there, but once I showed up, she decided to exploit it. She intended to have a huge scene with me, so that she could tell her estranged husband and friends that I ambushed her because she broke off our affair. Our affair. Apparently we had an affair. Oh, what an affair is that? You ask. I did too. Apparently the story some people got was that she and I were having an affair, and it ended and I was stalking her. Her husband left her because he found out. So people more inclined to believe her just thought that was what happened and wanted nothing to do with me anymore. So why did her husband actually leave? Well, some of you called it. According to her, he was cheating on her a bunch and overall not a nice person. She never actually cheated on him, but used me to pretend that she did without my knowledge. So after the joke at the gathering, which may have indeed been in poor taste, they had a huge fight and he left the house. As for the thing with his family, from what I gather it was some dude sleeping with his cousin's wife or some such shit. So anyway, she tells me all this insanity and tops it off with that my message really moved her and we can still be friends. The reason she rushed to show up at 7 a.m.? My message made her realize I am actually the only one who really cares about her and everyone else in her life is fake and doesn't really care. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but now this sounds like some really manipulative shit to me. And now I'm thinking back to a lot of our previous interactions, and a lot of them also seem like that to me now. I am not a confrontational person. I was willing to accept that I fucked up. Maybe some of you were right, and the joke was in poor taste and I'm a huge asshole for making it because I thought that if he knew the story he would get the call back, and if he didn't I'd tell him a funny story about his wife. I accept all that criticism. But this? Fuck no. I was done. I tell her I'm done with her shit. She can get back to her husband, leave her husband, keep any friends she wants, because I am fucking done. I can forgive a lot, but she has basically not communicated with me for over 15 years. I was telling her everything about my life and my feelings, and I was absolutely appalled by just how much of a one-way street it turned out to be. I feel like I didn't ever really know her. Maybe I played a role in that too. Maybe I was self-centered or selfish and didn't consider her emotions or her signs. I don't know. And you know what? At this point I don't think it matters. She lied to me so much. She lied to so many people so much. I just don't care anymore. I don't think there's anything left to this friendship. And the worst part? I just gave you this huge update, and I genuinely don't know how much of it is true. Maybe she was completely honest with me. Maybe she lied about everything and we're still playing 4 days chess. Who knows? I certainly don't. And that, more than anything, is why this friendship is over. Because even if I could forgive everything, I can never really trust her. So that's that. There will probably not be any more updates because this was meant to be a lighthearted post and it turned out into a total clusterfuck and I'm just so tired and so sad. I'm sorry if this wasn't as readable or as coherent as my previous post. This just happened and I'm just exhausted. My wife has been very supportive, though I assume at some point I'm due some well-earned I told you so's. She knows there wasn't an affair and certainly no stalking, and most of my friends probably know that too. I may try reaching out to some others because, well, I don't know, Maybe they were told even worse things about me. But I am just done with this. And now I'm going to spend what's left of this weekend with my family and try to put this shit behind me. Thank you all for reading, and for your advice. Am I the asshole for stepping in to defend a teenage cashier after a rude customer made her cry at the supermarket? So, this happened yesterday, and I'm still wondering if I overreacted. I, 35F, was doing my usual weekly grocery shopping at a local supermarket. It was a busy afternoon, and the line at the checkout was pretty long. I was waiting patiently when I noticed the woman in front of me, probably mid-50s, becoming increasingly agitated as the teenage cashier, who couldn't have been older than 17, was scanning her items. The cashier seemed a bit flustered. I could tell she was probably new, making a few mistakes here and there, but nothing serious. The older woman, however, was not having it. She started muttering under her breath, rolling her eyes, and tapping her foot. Finally, when the cashier accidentally scanned an item twice and needed to call for a supervisor to void it, the woman lost it. She started berating the poor girl, saying things like, "How hard can it be to do this job? You can't even do basic tasks, you're wasting people's time." She just kept going on, and the more she yelled, the more flustered the cashier got until she started tearing up. I stood there for a second, hoping the lady would cool down, but she didn't. The poor cashier was clearly trying her best to keep it together. That's when I stepped in. I said to her, "You don't have the right to treat someone like that. She's doing her best, and it's just a mistake. If you're so unhappy, maybe you should try working like her for a day and see how easy it is." The woman looked stunned and told me to mind my own business. I replied, "It is my business when you're making a kid cry over something as stupid as groceries." The cashier's supervisor had arrived by then and stepped in to handle the situation, and the woman stormed off still muttering and cursing. After she left, the cashier thanked me with teary eyes, but a couple of people behind me in line gave me looks like I was the one who had done something wrong. Now I'm second-guessing myself. So Reddit, Ada for telling her off? My husband abruptly adopted a Burmese python, which caused me anxiety and fear. Years later, our marriage fell apart, leading to divorce. Original post, May 7, 2015. Maybe this would be more appropriate on our snakes, but this problem is less about the python itself and more about my relationship with my husband. So personally, I don't think so. 6 months ago, our corn snake unexpectedly died. My husband and I were both very upset. He was a cute little guy and still very young. My husband has owned several small reptiles during his lifetime, and he told me he was thinking of trying a milk snake this time instead of a corn or a garter. Instead, 2 months after our corn died, he came home with a baby Burmese python. Apparently it's always been his dream to own a Burmese. Not only am I pissed that he got something like that without consulting me, on the upside, where we live they are legal. But I had several reservations that have only grown since we've owned it. I have GAD and that thing triggers my anxiety like no other. When I was doing research about Burmese pythons, I kept reading stories about them killing pets, children, and even their owners. So now I'm freaked out and have barely slept for 4 months. This is made worse by the fact that my husband has no experience with large snakes, and the larger the python grows, the more it shows, and also by us having a cat. The other snakes we've had, our corn snake, and my husband's old garter snake, pose no threat, but now I constantly worry that the python is going to get out and eat her. I've taken to locking the cat in our bedroom at night, which interferes with our sleep since she meows and scratches at the door, and I constantly worry about her when she's home alone. I'll reiterate, this thing is fucking huge. He is already 6 feet long. I'm home more than my husband, so I have to feed it and change its substrates often. I hate doing both. So much. Especially now that he's graduated to eating rabbits and pigs. I honestly think that since my husband bought him without consulting me, that caring for it should be his sole job, but I'm not going to let it go hungry or live in its own waste out of pride. I honestly don't think we'll be able to give this snake the best quality of life, which I think is essential for all pets. He's getting too big for the tank he's in, which is his third since we've gotten him, and I don't think we have the room in our house for the enclosure my husband wants to build him. His food is very expensive and eats into our savings, but it's what he needs, so we can't downgrade. The python does not deserve to live in a tiny space and eat inadequate food because my husband wanted one as a kid. At the same time, it's a good possibility it could eat us out of house and home. I don't want kids while we own a python, and these things can live up to 20 years. I don't want to ever have children, which I've dreamed of, because of a python. Because of all these reasons, but especially the ones about our cat and its quality of life, I think we should rehome the python, preferably to a wildlife sanctuary or something. I've gently brought all of this up to my husband. How much mental anguish it causes me, how worried I am for our cat, How the snake is unsustainable and all he's done is tell me to get over it, accuse me of not caring about his happiness and tell me I'm being prejudiced against animals that aren't cute and cuddly. None of this is true, not even the last accusation. I liked his smaller snakes a lot. How can I communicate productively with my husband about this issue? He already loves this snake and I think that's getting in the way of him seeing reason. Edit, fucked up the title. My husband is male. Edit 2. For the snake people, I acknowledge now that our husbandry is probably wrong, proving my point even more. Also, I have been informed that the snake probably wasn't a baby if it's at this size now, so take that into account. I am not the most knowledgeable about snakes. TL.dr, my husband adopted a Burmese python without consulting me. For a variety of reasons, most of all that I worry that it could kill us and the cat, that we don't have enough experience with large reptiles, and that its conditions are too expensive. I think we should rehome it. My husband thinks this means I hate snakes and is offended. I want to rehome the python. I need advice on how to communicate with him in a way that will make him see my perspective. Relevant comments, additional info, OOP on her husband's rebuttals to her arguments. Here they were. As far as worrying about the python getting out and killing the cat / future kids us. I won't let it get out. You need to go on new anxiety medication. Never mind the fact that both the corn and the garter escaped from their tanks. Well, what are you going to do? Let it starve just because you don't like it? That's cruel. He says that we have room for the enclosure and that we'll find money to keep buying it food. He says I'm ridiculous to not want babies while we have a python and says everything will be fine. I don't find any of his rebuttals particularly compelling because they're just, no, that won't happen to a concern of mine without explaining why it won't happen. Update 1, May 14, 2015. First of all, I have to say thank you for the outpouring of support I got, especially from the reptile enthusiasts who happen to be browsing this sub. You guys are awesome. Now I just want to say at the beginning what everyone wants to hear, the snake is gone and my cat is all right. Here's how it happened. Thursday night while I was replying to people in my post, several people suggested talking to my husband's friend, who owns Burmese pythons, is an experienced reptile keeper, and could be a huge help. I was too blinded by the situation, my own anxiety to even think of that. I messaged him on Facebook Thursday night and told him the situation. He was shocked at just how bad things were, but apparently he tried to warn my husband that owning small snakes and then jumping to a burn is like thinking owning house cats makes you qualified to own a tiger, but my husband didn't listen. He's been busy going to reptile shows, dude breeds venomous cobras, he's kind of a badass, so he only saw the snake in person once when we just got it and was immediately disturbed when I told him about the overfeeding. My husband's desire to start it on live food, and the fact that it free roams and is handed alone. He told me he'd come over the next day, Friday, and give my husband a real talk, as well as do anything he could to help us rehome it. I decided I couldn't live another day in the house like that and neither could my cat, so Friday morning I moved out to my mother's while my husband was at work. It was a bit sneaky, but I knew that if I tried to leave while he was home he'd try to convince me to stay. I called him on his lunch break though and told him I'd left until the snake was gone. He was very upset, but started accusing me of being so petty as to let a snake wreck our marriage. I had nothing productive to say to that. So I told him I'd talk to him later. Well, my husband's friend was so angry at what he saw of the snake that when he got to the house when my husband was home from work he gave him the tongue lashing of his life, and told him in plain terms that now that he saw how woefully inadequate we were as big snake keepers there was no way he was going to let the snake stay at our house. Being yelled at really affected him. When my husband drove over to my mother's to talk to me he looked like a kicked puppy. He broke down and told me that he loved me, that he was sorry for the hell he'd put me through, and that it had taken having reason yelled to him by an expert for him to really see what was going on and that he understood now that the snake could no longer live with us. I know that at that point that the sorrow he felt was due to having his snake taken away, not of real understanding, not yet. So don't worry, he's not completely off the hook. It was cathartic to hear though. His friend contacted a herpetology society he works with regularly and then, a member of that society whose specialty is rehabilitating snakes that irresponsible pet owners get and then mistreat on his ranch. So the snake went yesterday to this guy's ranch, where he'll be fed the right food, and go on a diet, apparently, and live in a space big enough for him. My husband and I have talked a lot about this and he acknowledged that his fervent desire to fulfill his childhood dream made him careless and selfish, that he wasn't trying to be malicious towards me, but he just wanted the snake so badly he'd do and say anything to keep it. It still seems like, though, that he hasn't learned, which I'm not expecting this early but is still a bit disappointing. He talked yesterday about getting a ball python and I put my foot down. I don't think we should get another snake for a long time. On Sunday I sat him down and asked him to tell me the truth of how he got the python, Because walking into a pet shop for a milk snake and just finding a Burmese was sounding more and more implausible the more I thought about it. He admitted that he arranged to get one with a breeder online while he was telling me he wanted a little snake, meaning he was actively lying to me. This breeder is also a state away, meaning my husband participated in something illegal when he met up with him to get it, since transporting Burmese pythons across state lines is against the Lacey Act. I'm very angry about this. I'm upset about his lies, and I'm upset that he blew me off for months. He admitted he lied just because he knew I'd say no, which shows such an immaturity that almost disgusts me. I'm upset that he broke the law. I'm upset that he only listened to what I told him when it came from someone else. Apparently he's been having a quarter-life crisis that he didn't tell me about, because he feels that he should have accomplished more with his life at 26, he never went to college. I feel sympathy for him. But that's no excuse to treat me badly. I moved back home with Kitty last night, but our marriage is in severe jeopardy right now due to the lying and the lack of respect my husband has shown me. But I made vows to stick with him and I don't take those lightly. We're going to be getting counseling, which I hope will make him really see what was wrong with what he did, rather than a knee-jerk response to being in trouble, so to speak, and will strengthen us. If not, well, I'll have to consider my options. P.S. People were saying in the other post that we were actually feeding the snake guinea pigs and that I was lying to make the snake look bad. Well, I was fudging the truth, but not the way. We were feeding it dead piglets. My husband's cousin owns a working ranch with several pigs, and my husband was buying them from him for a pretty penny. I didn't want to say it because I thought people would focus on the snake eating baby animals and start calling for its blood instead of offering me advice. TL.dr. I went to my mother's with my cat and my husband's reptile keeper friend caused him to see reason. The snake is gone, and I'm back with my very happy and healthy kitty. However, our marriage was severely hurt by this whole thing, and we're going to be getting counseling. Update to June 13, 2015. Hi, I'm back. The snake is still gone, but I guess I'm coming back out of desperation. People messaged me wanting to know how I was doing anyway. On the surface, therapy has been going well. My husband has been doing everything right. He's been contrite, open-minded, and treats me like a princess at all times. I can tell at home that he's making a conscious effort to listen to my opinions and thoughts, and incorporate our therapist's suggestions into our lives. I feel like the biggest bitch saying this, but I don't think it's enough. Over these past weeks I've had to come to terms with the fact that something about how I view my husband has fundamentally changed. And finally, after extensive soul-searching a few days ago, I realized what it was. I have no respect for his intelligence anymore, after all this. That is very, very important to me. And now it's just gone and I don't know how it can come back without him getting a personality overhaul. It killed my physical attraction to him. I normally have a high libido and prior to all this we made love 4 to 5 times a week. Now, since all this went down we've been intimate 3 times. To be fair, while the snake was here we were down to 2 to 3 times a week, but it was still more frequent than this. Despite all the changes he's making, he's still himself and I don't think I can like who I know him to be now. He's still his goofy, absent-minded self who needs me to balance the checkbook and pack his lunch. I can't respect that anymore. I don't want to be his mom or a naggy sitcom wife. I used to love doing these things for him. Throughout our relationship I've taken care of him, patched him up and helped him solve his problems. I always saw it as the ultimate expression of love. Now I'm just sick of it. He can tell something's still wrong. He's irritated about my lack of forgiveness and lack of a sex drive lately when he's objectively doing all the right things. But his lack of understanding towards my apprehension makes my feelings even more pronounced. I realized the other day that I love him dearly as a friend. I've known him since I was 9 years old but no longer as a husband. That devastates me. I can't believe I'm thinking divorce after less than a year of marriage. I feel like such a failure. I haven't broached these feelings in therapy yet, because they crystallized only a few days ago. But I don't know how to start because I know saying them will mean my marriage will be over. I have talked to my mom and friends about this, and they all tell me to wait longer, to stick it out, because I made vows. But I feel like I found out something fundamental about my husband that I wish I never had, and that nothing can be the same now. TL.er. I think I'm going to have to divorce my husband and it's killing me inside. Update 3 October 14, 2024, 9 years later. Basically, my ex-husband brought home a Burmese python after telling me he wanted a milk snake. I was really scared of it and anxious and he was dismissive of my worries. I ended up getting the snake shipped off to a reptile ranch, but it absolutely shook my trust in my ex because he was lying to me. It also made me realize he relied on me to do everything for him like a second mother and that I hated that. I really tried to work through the feelings I posted in the second update, but after 3 months, we separated. It's totally okay if you judge me for this because I judge myself. After being separated for half a year, we ended up having sex. My grandma had just died. I was devastated. And he came to the funeral to support me, and because he'd known her forever and loved her too. We went home together after the family lunch and we ended up having comfort sex. Neither of us wanted kids at that point, but my IUD had slipped into my cervix at some point before this and I ended up getting pregnant. Both of us were unsure about introducing a kid into our relationship, but decided to get back together and make another effort. I had always wanted to be a mom, and didn't want to abort. We found out pretty early into the pregnancy that it was actually a molar pregnancy, meaning that instead of a normal fetus, I was pregnant with a tumor. I had the mole removed, but I was one of those lucky people who develops cancer from their molar pregnancy. Luckily, the cancer was caught when I was only at stage 2 and responded really well to chemotherapy. I've been cancer-free since 2016. However, my ex's behavior when I was extremely sick from chemo, we had stayed together after losing the pregnancy, caused me to put my foot down and want a divorce. He wouldn't or couldn't pick up the slack around the house and I couldn't deal with it anymore. I felt like I couldn't depend on him for anything, not even when I had cancer. Literally a week after I was told I was cancer-free, I told him I was moving out and wanted a divorce. I lived with my mom for a year while our divorce was being finalized and a bit after it, and then decided to get a job in a new city because I needed a new beginning. I also decided to fulfill a dream of mine I'd been mulling over for a while and went back to college to get my BSN in 2017. I graduated in 2019 because I was in an accelerated program for people who already have another degree, and I now work as a neonatal nurse. The job can be really wearing and difficult, but it's so amazing watching tiny and sick babies grow and thrive and eventually leave. I feel like I've found my calling. I also met a guy in my class when I went back to school. We were just friends for 2 years, because I didn't feel ready to date, and then in 2019 we started dating. That guy is now my husband. We got married in 2022. My current husband is the most amazing man and partner I could have ever asked for. I can fully lean on him, and him on me. And I don't have to ask him to please pick his socks up off of the floor. He even does most of the cooking because I hate cooking. Due to my cancer treatment, I went into premature ovarian failure, so we are going to start IVF in the new year with eggs I had frozen before my chemo began. We also want to adopt and/or foster at some point and have been looking into that as well. I know for sure my husband is going to be a wonderful support for me and an amazing father. At the time of my divorce, I had no confidence my ex would be either of those things. I don't want to just bash my ex though. He is doing much better since we got divorced. A month after I left for good, he attempted suicide and was put on a 72-hour hold at the hospital. He took their advice to follow up with a psychiatrist seriously, and was diagnosed with ADHD. It explains so much about how he was when we were together. A little later on, he was also diagnosed with autism. I don't speak to my ex because it's too painful for both of us, but my mom is still close to his mom and has given me some updates. He's taking medication that's really helped his ADHD and was able to go to trade school. He has a much better job now and has been in a steady relationship. I wish him all of the best. I look back on my old posts and all I can do is shake my head. I was putting up with so much I would never put up with now. I also thought I was so grown up because I was 24 and married, but clearly I still had maturing to do. Part of me feels sad for my ex too, because he was struggling for so long and I was writing him off as unhelpful. However, even though he had a medical reason for being inconsiderate, I still had to do what's best for me, and I was at my breaking point. Considering his success, I think we're better off without each other. Oh, and I still talk to my ex's friend, the cobra breeder, from time to time. Bucatini the Burmese python is still doing great in his new home. TLDR, I decided to finally leave after my ex was no help when I got pregnant with cancer. We're both doing great after the divorce, and splitting up was the best thing for both of us. When my son confessed his unspoken feelings, our once simple relationship became complicated beyond repair. On a calm evening, our quiet neighborhood was bathed in a beautiful orange glow as the sun started to drop behind the hills. The radio was humming softly in the background while I was in the kitchen making dinner. Eric, my son, had recently spent the weekend at home after attending college. The house exuded a serene, cozy vibe, the kind of tranquility that comes from familiarity. Eric had matured so rapidly. He was a child who followed me around the home and asked me a ton of questions about life, and it seemed like it was only yesterday. At 21, he had changed from the young boy I had known to a strong, self-assured, and occasionally unwittingly aloof young man. As he grew older, our relationship had changed, and I was still getting used to it. I called him from the living room when dinner was ready. He glanced at me as we sat at the table, and I noted that it was different, intense, and caused me to halt. At first I dismissed it as a figment of my imagination. We discussed how much he missed home, his classes, and his friends. But something I couldn't quite describe was evoked in me by the way he spoke and the way his eyes stayed on mine longer than normal. As we used to do frequently before he departed for college, we made the decision to watch a movie together after supper. The soft cushions and low lighting made the living area feel cozier than normal, which was ideal for a peaceful evening in. I couldn't recall the last time we spent an evening together in such tranquility. I noticed how he had matured into himself as the film went on, and I found myself looking at him more than I should have. He had grown into a man instead of the child I had reared. He moved closer to me on the couch just as I was starting to have a weird feeling of anxiety about the things that were going through my head. I initially believed it to be harmless, but then his hand touched mine. Something electrifying, something I knew I shouldn't feel, sparked through me. Startled by the intensity of the moment, I swiftly withdrew my hand. "What's wrong, Mom?" he said in a quiet, almost worried voice. Unsure of what to say, I stared at him with my heart pounding. I tried to brush the emotion aside and hoped he wouldn't notice our tension. "Nothing, sweetie, just tired, that's all," I said. However, I was aware that something had shifted at that very instant that we couldn't ignore. The distinction between mother and son had become hazy, and although neither of us had crossed it, there were many unsaid ideas in the air. The movie was playing in the background while we sat there in quiet, but neither of us was listening. I told him I had to get to bed early and got up, but as I was leaving, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something had changed between us. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts were racing. I knew I couldn't allow this emotion to intensify. For the benefit of both of us, I had to stay away. But I secretly didn't know how. I felt uneasy when I woke up the following morning. I kept thinking about what had happened the night before. I made an effort to dispel the sensation by telling myself it had all been in my imagination. Nothing more, nothing less, than I was his mother. I had a profound love for him, but not in a way that would ever be interpreted incorrectly. I convinced myself that I was acting irrationally. By the time I made it downstairs, Eric was already up and enjoying a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. He smiled at me as like nothing had occurred. Perhaps it had been nothing at all, simply a strange moment that only I had observed. I made the decision to ignore it for the time being. "Morning," I responded, attempting to sound as regular as possible while feigning a grin. "Morning, Mom," he said in a relaxed and informal tone. "I was considering taking a hike later. Would you like to accompany me? A trek?" We hadn't done anything like that together in a very long time. After how I felt last night, I briefly considered whether I should spend more time alone with him. However, I later told myself that it was just a mother and son hanging around. That was perfectly okay. "Sure," I replied. "It sounds nice." We traveled to a neighboring path later that afternoon, a location we had visited frequently when he was smaller. For that instant, the sky was a vivid blue, the air was clear, and everything seemed normal. We strolled alongside each other, discussing nothing specific, just our shared past experiences, his future ambitions, and the typical small talk. I started to giggle, felt more comfortable around him, and wondered if I had overreacted the previous evening. However, there were times when we stopped talking as we continued on the trail, leaving a lingering silence that felt heavier than it should have. At one point, Eric stopped walking and turned to face me when we came to a clearing with a stunning view of the valley below. He added, "You've always been there for me, Mom," in a quiet but earnest tone. "I don't know what I'd do without you." His tone was vulnerable, and there was something about the way he said it that surprised me and made my heart hurt. I tried to brighten the situation by smiling. "Well, you won't have to worry about that anytime soon," I laughed. "I'm not going anywhere." He was not amused. As an alternative, he moved closer and met my gaze. His words, "No, I mean it," went on. "You have never been just my mother. You've been something and everything." I went cold. I wasn't prepared for the weight and significance of the words that hung in the air. There was something in his eyes that made my pulse race again, just like the previous evening, but I looked for any indication that he was merely being sentimental or that this was an innocent moment of adoration. "Eric," I whispered in a voice that was hardly audible above a whisper, "you know how much I love you, right?" "Of course," he said, taking another step toward her. "I love you too, more than you realize." My heartbeat accelerated. This was not the proper way for a mother and son to look at one another or speak. My body felt immobile, even though my head begged me to take a step back and create some distance between us. I said, "I think we should head back," in a trembling voice. "It's getting late." However, He stretched out and softly touched my hand before I could move away. Even though the touch was harmless, I couldn't help but feel sick to my stomach because of the way he held on and the way his thumb softly touched my skin. "Mom," he whispered quietly, with a tone that I couldn't quite put my finger on. "I've been feeling something. Something I shouldn't be feeling. But I'm not sure how to put it. I believe you felt it as well." I was filled with panic. With my heart thumping in my chest, I withdrew my hand and stepped back. I said, "Eric, stop," in a shaky voice. "That's not what you mean. You're perplexed." His face was a mixture of hurt and bewilderment as he gazed at me. "Mom, I'm not confused. I am aware of my feelings." "No," I replied with a headshake. "This is incorrect. My son is you. We are unable to." I was unable to continue the phrase because it felt too heavy and risky to say aloud. Eric inhaled deeply, emotion obscuring his features. "I am aware. I can't help how I feel, even though I know it's wrong. Additionally, I don't believe you can." I fought to maintain my calm as tears filled my eyes. This was not taking place. This cannot be taking place. Before things progressed further and we crossed a line we would never be able to go back, I had to put an end to this. I broke my voice as I said, "I'm your mother. I also adore you, but not in that way. We can't. I can't." Thick and oppressive, the words hovered between us. His shoulders slumped in defeat, and I could see the sorrow in his eyes. He nodded slowly while down at the floor in embarrassment. "I apologize," he muttered. "I had no intention of. I didn't want to cause you any discomfort." I took a deep breath, attempting to suppress the tumultuous mixture of feelings churning within me. Though I wasn't positive, I answered quietly, "It's okay," and suggested that we simply head home. The silence on the way home felt oppressive. We both remained silent, Eric and I. Every second felt excruciatingly long because of the weight of what had been said on the trail hanging between us. My mind was racing as I tried to comprehend what had just transpired, but I kept my eyes on the road. His confession of feelings and the words that came out of his mouth astounded me. Everything I believed to be true about our relationship seemed to have been completely turned upside down. Upon arriving at the driveway, Eric murmured that he was heading to his room. He vanished up the stairs, and I did nothing to stop him. My body shook with the feelings I had been suppressing since the trail moment, and I fell onto the couch. I had no idea how to interpret any of it. He was my baby boy, my kid, but he was no longer a boy, and it was becoming frighteningly obvious that our connection had become more complicated than either of us had anticipated. The way he had looked at me and the way his palm had lingered on mine told me otherwise, even though I wanted to think that his feelings were only a phase, something temporary that would pass with time. I experienced a feeling of guilt, like if I had done something wrong. Perhaps I had been too close, too loving over the years. However, it wasn't correct, was it? It was expected of mothers to care for, love and support their sons. I had only ever done that. However, the odd tension that had developed between us now poisoned everything, and I was at a loss for how to resolve it. I tried to avoid him for the remainder of the day by keeping myself occupied with household tasks and anything else that would take my mind off of my feelings of perplexity. I was emotionally spent by the time evening arrived. Though I knew I couldn't escape it indefinitely, I didn't want to face what had happened. Eric and I couldn't continue acting as though nothing was wrong when it was so obviously not. I had been lying in bed for hours that night when I heard someone knock on my door. My heart fell. I recognized him. "Mom, can I come in?" Eric said in a quiet, almost tentative tone. My mind was screaming at me to say no, to put some distance between us, but I hesitated. But I knew I couldn't ignore him any longer. Despite how uncomfortable it was, I had to confront this. "Come in," I whispered softly as I sat up in bed and pulled the blankets up over my head, hoping that they would protect me from the impending mental storm. Eric entered, appearing just as torn and uncertain as I was. For a minute, unsure of what to do with himself, he stood at the edge of the room. He sat down on the bed's edge after a few seconds, but he remained at a distance. He said, "I'm sorry," in a regretful tone. What I said previously wasn't appropriate. I'm not sure what happened to me. Trying to think of the perfect words, I nodded slowly. "What happened earlier, Eric, that can't happen again," I added, acknowledging that this was confusing. "We must exercise caution. Things aren't meant to be this way." "I know," he said in a whisper, his eyes sad. "But Mom, it's really difficult. I have no idea why I feel this way. I've made an effort to ignore it, but it keeps returning." I was deeply affected by what he said. I was overcome with sadness. For him. For us both, really. I never thought I would find myself in this predicament, but here we were, caught in a maze of feelings that neither of us could unravel. I repeated, "I'm your mother," in a soft yet forceful voice. "I can only ever be that. You are aware of that, aren't you?" He nodded despite the agony in his eyes as he stared at me. "I know," he replied. I don't want to lose you." "You're not going to lose me," I told him. "But we need to establish limits, Eric. This is risky territory." There was silence between us for a moment. Though there was still the tension from earlier in the day, there was also an implicit awareness that things couldn't go on as they were. Even though neither of us wanted to admit it completely, we both knew it. I gently said, "Perhaps it would be best if you returned to school tomorrow. I think we both need some space to clear our heads." I could see the sadness in Eric's eyes, yet he nodded slowly. "Yeah," he muttered. "Maybe you're right." The air between us was heavy with unresolved emotions as I watched him pack his belongings the following morning. I wanted to give him a hug and reassure him that everything would be all right, but after everything that had transpired, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. The house felt more empty than it had in years when he eventually left. I tried to take it all in as I sat on the couch and gazed out the window. It wasn't any easier, even though I knew that setting some distance between us was the best decision for both of us. A mother and son's connection should be straightforward and unadulterated, but ours had devolved into something much more complex that neither of us could manage. I made an effort to get back into my routine as the days went by, but it wasn't the same. Without Eric, the home felt too quiet, and I was thinking about him more than I should have. I hoped that the distance would be beneficial and that it would allow us both the time we needed to work through our emotions. However, I knew in my heart that things would never return to how they were. We couldn't reverse the change that had occurred between us, and I wasn't sure what was ahead for us. My wife cheated with my cousin and had a baby. My family kept it secret for years, and now they want back into my life as I've found success. Please be patient with me as I explain this entire matter to my family because there is a lot of background involved. I'm a 44-year-old man who has been married for 10 years. My 41-year-old wife and I have been together for 13 years. We are content with our lives and have an 8-year-old kid as well. I have been married before though. I married at the age of 22, but regrettably, for reasons I'm still unclear, our marriage ended in divorce 3 years later. Since middle school, my ex-wife, who I'll call Amy, has been with me. We were essentially childhood lovers. We made the decision to be married as soon as we were out of college and had respectable careers. For the first few years, everything was good between us, but then, for some reason, things started to go strange. After that, I felt as though she was not interested at all, despite my best efforts to maintain the spark. A few weeks before our third wedding anniversary, she handed me divorce papers and declared she was done, despite my best efforts to win her back. My goal was to improve our marriage. She was only able to tell me that she was no longer in love with me, which was all I wanted as an explanation for why we had to break up after all this time together. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do about it. Since I had no other choice and didn't want to prolong the divorce and make her even more unhappy by making her live with me, I made the decision to proceed. Because of the limited number of shared assets we had, the process was really simple. I never saw her again after that. After the divorce was finalized, she changed towns and shut off all communication, according to a few people I spoke with. Even my relatives stopped talking to me around the time of the divorce, which was incredibly odd, but this is usual. When I was going through a really trying time, they ought to have been there for me, but instead they began to distance themselves from me. I made a concerted effort to stay in contact with them once the divorce was finalized, but I discovered that I had been blocked everywhere. I even made a few attempts to go see them, but neither my sister nor my parents ever let me in. It all struck me hard because it was so weird and I was already going through a difficult period. I couldn't even bring myself to do anything for a few years following the divorce, so I quit my work and spent a few months at home without a job. But I'm really fortunate to have friends by my side who encouraged me to attempt to move on and do better even during such trying moments. After the divorce, my friends looked after me because my family was never there for me. I ultimately made the decision to open my own eatery. Although it had always been my ambition, I had put it off in order to accumulate sufficient funds because I also needed to consider Amy during our marriage. But because we were divorced, I made the decision to go ahead and do it alone. I also chose to call the restaurant the name my parents had recommended. My buddies helped me approach a few potential investors, secure their support and begin developing a business plan. I opened my own restaurant a few years later. After the divorce, it took me about 4 years to get back on my feet. I met my current wife 2 years later. We started conversing after she told me she loved my restaurant at a function where we met through friends. I asked her to marry me after 3 years of dating because I wanted to give love another try. Here we are with our son 10 years later. My business life has also improved over the past few years, in addition to my personal life. In my career, I've done fairly well. It all began with a restaurant, but because of its success, we gradually started to grow. I am the CEO of my own hospitality firm at the moment, and we operate a chain of hotels and restaurants that are quite well liked. We intend to grow it even further in the hopes of gaining recognition outside of the state. I have put a lot of effort into getting to where I am now, but it has been a difficult journey. Since of this, I recently agreed to an interview since I felt it was an indication that I had truly made it. However, after seeing that interview on the television, my family decided to get in touch with me again, and I honestly had no clue that it would generate such a storm in my life. I didn't really think my family would have watched it because the channel that carried it was a somewhat popular one. Even if they had, I didn't think they would arrive at my workplace. My workplace's location isn't particularly discreet, so they must have had little trouble finding me. Still, it was highly improper of them to arrive at my place of employment and insist on seeing me while I was there. Regretfully, they did precisely that 3 days ago. Seeing them after all this time was really odd. The receptionist told me that my family was waiting outside when they arrived, even though I was working. I initially assumed she was referring to my wife and kid, which would have been strange given that my son was at school and my wife was at work. She went on to say that my sister and parents were present to see me. I was having trouble processing what was happening at the time. I informed the receptionist that they would have to be ordered to go for the time being, but I would see them later. Naturally, they persisted and were making a scene, so I had to step in. Before I could talk to them and find out what was going on, I didn't want security to eject them from the premises. I therefore walked to the lobby to see them. They immediately pretended that nothing had changed in the over 2 decades since I had last seen them. They started praising me right away, telling me how wonderful it was that I had achieved enough accomplishment to make the headlines and how motivational my tale was. They should have been included in that story as members of my family, so hearing them say it felt odd. They began discussing how they had seen my family, but I tried to dismiss it by telling them I had to return to work. I had mentioned in my interview how helpful my wife and son had been to me along the way. They were referring to certain family images that were also featured on the channel. Since they had been away from us for a while, they began to express a wish to meet my wife and their grandson as soon as possible. At that point, they said I should have done more to reach out to them after the divorce and chastised me for not trying hard enough. It dawned on me that I might at last be able to find out what had transpired at that time. Therefore, rather than telling them to leave, I chose to let them speak. In an attempt to find some closure, I even sat down with them in the lobby. During their conversation, I learned the true reason my family had deserted me and why Amy had chosen to divorce me. Yes, Amy had been cheating on me, as you may have surmised by now. My parents had been helping her hide it the entire time, so I had never suspected it. However, they stated that they had their reasons, or at least, those they believed to be legitimate, so don't pass judgment too hastily. Amy had apparently been having an affair with my cousin, who was the son of my dad's older brother. Everything made sense when they eventually told me. I now saw why they had supported her, why I hadn't received an invitation to any family gatherings for the previous 20 years, and why I had been rejected without any fault of my own. I had never liked my cousin, let's call him Carl, since he was a rude, entitled brat. Unfortunately, his father and the rest of the family felt he should be given a free pass for everything because his mother had died when he was only 6 months old. No one ever told him how to act throughout his life, and he consistently got away with anything. The fact that my uncle, Carl's father, was my dad's supervisor and had founded the family business before my dad joined it didn't help either. When Carl decided he wanted to be with Amy after we were married and she agreed, my family felt compelled to support them. They couldn't take the chance of upsetting my uncle. But apparently it was easy for them to decide to risk their friendship with me. They did precisely that. They also informed me that my uncle made it very apparent during the divorce that he did not want any family members, including my parents and sister, to communicate with me in any way. After Amy said she was expecting my child, they apparently attempted to object. They would have to cut me off if they ever wished to communicate with their grandson. In addition, when Amy filed for divorce, I was never informed that she was expecting a child. I couldn't have predicted because she hadn't been displaying at the time either. She had moved out long before the divorce was finalized, so she hadn't been living with me. Therefore, even before my son was born, I was unaware that I had become a father. It seems that my daughter, who is now almost 20, believes Carl is her biological father even though she has never met me. In any case, my parents told me this about what actually occurred all those years ago. It felt like I was being told a story, and I was hardly able to process any of it at the time. To acknowledge that this was my reality, I had to pinch myself. My family thought that by achieving job security and establishing a bond with their granddaughter, they had effectively cut me off. They had cut me off because, in my opinion, they were simply cowards. They could have simply told me the truth and let me deal with it, but instead they decided to be scared of my dad's brother, acting as though he could do more than just drive my father out of the family business. My dad could have taken legal action in retaliation even at that point. I honestly can't think of a reason why you didn't notify me about Amy's pregnancy or the fact that I have a daughter. They sat on this for 20 years without saying anything until they realized I was doing well in life. They suddenly felt a great deal of pity for everything and wanted to make amends with me. Sadly for them, I was able to see through their deception. I told them I needed them to go as soon as they were done telling me everything because I didn't have the capacity to forgive them right now after what they had just told me. Since we were seated in my workplace's lobby and I didn't want to start a fight, I made an effort to be polite. I couldn't, however, rely on others to act similarly. As soon as I told them to go, they began complaining that I should consider their point of view and how challenging the situation had been for them as well. I informed them that I was positive they were only contacting me now because they wanted a share of my success. They strongly rejected it. My sister even went so far as to argue that they were the reason I was successful in the first place, as they had come up with the name for my restaurant back when it was still just a dream. Given that they hadn't helped me over the years and that I had created everything on my own with the assistance of my friends rather than them, I thought it was rather brave of her to make such a claim. It wasn't enough for them to claim credit for my accomplishment just because they suggested a name. I laughed at her because the idea was so ridiculous. I threatened to have her and my parents ejected from the building if they didn't leave right away. They persisted in their argument, stating that they would not go until we had resolved our differences. But I was not interested in carrying on the discussion. I therefore carried out my promise and had security eject them from the building. As they were being led away, they were obviously very unhappy and tried attempting to convince me that they had no other option. However, I don't believe that. They had an option, but they chose poorly, and now they will have to live with the repercussions. They have survived the previous 20 years without seeing me or my family, so I have no doubt that they will be able to do the same in the future. In any case, they haven't stopped attempting to get in touch with me 3 days after this happened. They haven't had the guts to return inside my workplace, but they have been showing up outside, sending emails to my work address, and texting me on social media. Their attitude has clearly changed as seen by the numerous apologies in their mails. They appear somewhat agitated as they wait for me to stop for them outside my place of employment. However, I ignore them and simply drive past. I almost feel sorry for them now because of how horrible things have gone. To be honest, I've discussed this with my wife because, no matter what I do about my family, we still need to consider my daughter, whom I was unaware of until a few days ago. We have been debating whether or not to track down my daughter and attempt to get in touch with her. We also have to deal with my family, who I don't think will leave until they have another opportunity to talk to me. My wife believes that perhaps I should invite them over and have a conversation with them in order to at least try to resolve the issue. Since this circumstance isn't healthy for my emotional health, she thinks it might help get rid of all the toxicity. But I'm not personally interested in doing it. Given everything I've learned and what I'm going through right now, I don't have the mental capacity to deal with them, so I just want to keep ignoring them till they go away. We are struggling greatly to decide how to proceed and handle this. After 20 years of no communication, I also question whether I'm wrong for not wanting to give my parents another chance to talk. Update 1. A week and 3 days have passed since my initial post, and my spouse and I have made the decision to keep ignoring my relatives. Fortunately, they haven't been showing up to my place of employment for the previous several days. This is most likely due to their fatigue or fear of security. In any case, I'm glad. It was much simpler for me to quit thinking about them after they stopped visiting. It appears that I was feeling guilty about how I was handling the matter because of their presence. I no longer feel bad about not responding to their texts. No matter how many times they apologize, nothing will change. No amount of apologies will make up for the fact that they have failed me as a family. I'm not even bothering to block them anymore, even though they've kept sending messages from different accounts and email addresses. What's the point? I'll continue to ignore them even if they try to apologize by making new accounts. We'll see how long they can continue this. Let's go on to the other problem we are facing, my daughter. Neither my wife nor I knew how to handle the matter. My parents told me where she attends college throughout our talk, so we have her name. I haven't taken any action yet, but my assistant was able to locate her social media profiles. I am unsure of if it is appropriate for me to contact her, and I'm unsure of how to inform her that I am her biological father. I can't just walk up to Amy's house and demand custody or anything because she's not a kid. Furthermore, given what I've learned about Amy, I'd prefer not to have her involved in this at all. I no longer have any regard for that woman or my family as a whole because they are all cowards with no courage, and I don't want anything to do with them. I can't say the same for my kid though. She is still my biological daughter, regardless of who reared her. Please let me know if you have any suggestions about how to approach her or if I should even be doing this. I also want to thank everyone who left a remark on my first post. I hope you can help me again because your advice has been incredibly useful. Update 2. My wife and I made the decision to move ahead after reading the comments on my last update. Waiting for the ideal moment or chance to get in touch with my daughter was pointless. We had to remove the band-aid and finish the job. We thought it wouldn't be appropriate to fly out to her because she lives in a different state, so we chose to message her first and see how things work out. We messaged her on Instagram and gave her the most polite explanation possible. We are merely awaiting a response at this time. She will undoubtedly find it difficult to accept, just as it is for me. The fact that my wife has been so understanding of my efforts to reconnect with my long-lost kid from my previous marriage is beyond me. We're trying our best, but I'm sure it's bringing up a lot of complex feelings for all of us. I would love to establish a relationship with my daughter, therefore I sincerely hope she responds. My parents haven't visited my place of employment in a long time. They wrote me a lengthy email yesterday in which they expressed their sincere regret for everything and their want to mend our friendship. They only required one opportunity. Additionally, they indicated they would wait for me to get in touch with them before contacting me again. To be honest, I'm a little relieved that they finally understood that I don't want to talk to them at this time. The last thing I need is for them to add additional drama to my already full plate. All I can hope for now is that they follow through on their promise and don't get in touch with me again. I will talk to them myself if I feel ready or want to at any time. But at this point, it doesn't appear probable that this will occur anytime soon. The situation has only gotten worse now that I know the true reason they haven't spoken to me in 20 years. I don't think the feeling of betrayal and hurt will go away anytime soon. There was at least one positive outcome from this. I learned more about my daughter, and I'm hoping she will choose to give our relationship another shot. In case she doesn't want to speak with us, I haven't yet told my kid about her. I don't want to give him unrealistic expectations. But if everything works out, he might see her as a sister, and I might meet the daughter I never knew I had. Right now, I'm feeling a lot of different emotions, and I'm making a lot of effort to control them. Update 3. I made contact with my daughter on social media approximately 2 weeks ago. I messaged her, telling her everything about myself and our relationship. I finally got a response today after waiting for 2 weeks. She only mentioned that she had discussed me with her mother and that she had discovered that I am her biological father. She was shocked by this, of course. She had no notion that she wasn't Carl's daughter and had thought he was her biological father for the last 20 years. She also told me that she wanted to see me and my family after learning the real tale of how her mother and I got to be this way. Since she doesn't have the money to visit us at this time and isn't talking to her family, we are taking a plane to see her this weekend. She didn't go into too much detail, but Amy first attempted to deny the message when she challenged her about it. But in the end, she had to be honest with her. Since I don't want to talk to Amy, I sincerely hope she doesn't get in touch with me. I haven't heard from her yet. When my family learned that I had contacted my daughter, they promptly betrayed their word and began attempting to speak with me. My uncle was obviously upset that I found out, and rightfully so, as they had worked for 20 years to make sure I never found out so that their lives wouldn't be disturbed. I've learned that my uncle is blaming my parents. My dad still fears his older brother, despite the fact that he no longer works for him and owns his own company. He has been pleading with me to explain that neither Carl nor my uncle were involved in my discovery, but I fail to understand the purpose. They are the only ones who could have maintained such a secret, so even if I did, I doubt anyone would believe me. The majority of my family has never been close to me, and they haven't bothered to talk to me in 20 years. It's amusing how frantic they are right now to keep their friendship with my uncle intact. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. I lost out on 20 years of a relationship with my daughter because of them. This, I believe, is the least I can do. Update 4. I finally got to meet my kid today with my family. It was initially uncomfortable, then moved, but overall it was simply lovely. Despite having grown up with two of the worst people I've ever met, she seems to be a decent and caring person. She is a very mature and clever young woman, whether it is due to her natural disposition or to the fact that they raised her well. During our lengthy talk, we discussed Amy and Carl's situation. She told me that she didn't care that they didn't approve of her meeting us. She doesn't care what her folks think now that she knows the truth. She doesn't intend to eliminate Amy and Carl from her life entirely because they don't have any other children but her, but she will undoubtedly put them out of her life for a while as she tries to come to terms with everything. She informed me that she also needed time to begin developing a relationship with me. I completely understand that she's in a really strange mental state at the moment. She seemed to get along well with my wife and her half-brother, and we had a great day overall. During supper, we discovered that my parents, who are her grandparents, had maintained communication with her throughout the entire time. Given that they were her grandfather's brother's family rather than her biological grandparents, she always thought it was odd how sentimental they were about her. Now they understand why they were so devoted to her. But now that she has learned all of this, she and I both view them differently. Since I'm a lot older than her, I can probably relate to her feelings, but not totally. Having been deceived by those she thought were closest to her throughout her life, she is just 20 years old and is likely finding it much more difficult to cope. In any case, we will both need to work on this, and maybe things will improve in the future. We're going to make an effort to make it the greatest it can be, so I know it must be. The fact that the meeting went well and that my family and I both seem satisfied after everything makes me very happy. No matter what Carl, Amy, or my family have done, I'm also rather happy with the situation. The important thing is that we finally have an opportunity to put things right after all these years, and I'm going to take advantage of it. My sister attacked me and stole my boyfriend 6 years ago. Now, my parents are attempting to reconcile us by inviting my estranged sister to my bridal shower. My sister is 26 and I'm 28. After a horrible incident that I will describe in a moment, we haven't spoken for about 6 years. For whatever reason, my parents never discouraged the fierce sibling rivalry that existed between my sister and me as we grew up. They would really encourage us to compete more. In retrospect, I don't think that was a smart move because it caused us to become really envious of one another. Perhaps our relationship would have been better if they had taken care of it sooner rather than later. When we were younger, we could at least occasionally set aside our differences. But as we became older, our animosity for one another increased. When we reached high school, we hardly spoke to one another, and we enjoyed it that way. After that, I left for college and only saw my sister when I got home, which was somewhat preferable than always being around someone who was unpleasant. I began dating my fiancé around the time I was set to graduate. He finally plucked up the courage to ask me out before I graduated from college, after we had been friends for 3 years. Since I too thought he was great, I said sure. Since we had been friends for years and it didn't seem like a huge deal, I moved in with him after graduation. I brought him home for supper one weekend after we had been dating for 3 months because I wanted to introduce him to my parents. It just so happened that my sister, who had just begun college, had also made the decision to spend the weekend at home. It was already a formula for disaster, and we were both there. At the time, my life was going really well. I had a lovely boyfriend, a career, and my own apartment. My sister, however, wasn't doing as well. She was angry that she had to settle for her second choice of college after failing to get into her first choice. My parents later told me that she was having a hard time making friends at college, which is why she was coming home so frequently. I could tell my sister wasn't pleased when I presented my boyfriend to my parents. In the background, she pouted. I introduced them even though my partner was aware of my tense connection with her. She instantly turned on her charm as I introduced her. I tried not to be bothered by it, even though it seemed strange. But then things became more bizarre. My sister was very interested in my boyfriend's life and kept attempting to talk to him when we were all sitting around talking. We were both frightened, but we remained silent. Then she went too far and began openly flirting with him in front of me throughout dinner. She wasn't even subtle about it. She was clearly doing it to annoy me. I didn't want my boyfriend to realize how dysfunctional our family was. So I tried to ignore it for a time, but I was at my breaking point. Since he was my lover, I lost my temper and urged my sister to stop since it was repulsive that she was flinging herself at him in that manner. She simply rolled her eyes and continued to speak to him. I snapped and screamed at her, telling her that he was my visitor and that she should show him respect since she was making him feel uncomfortable. She was only assisting my lover in realizing that there were alternatives to me, and I recall her saying that he deserved better. We began cursing at each other because of the manner she stated it, which really irritated me. She wasn't doing as well as I was, so I dubbed her a loser and stated she was resentful. She was deeply affected by that remark. She pulled me over and slapped me after grabbing my hair across the table. Since we hadn't had a physical altercation since middle school, I was initially too surprised to respond. However, it escalated into a full-fledged fight after she struck me. We were so violent that my boyfriend and our parents had to break us apart. Even though we were both hurt and scratched up by the end, we continued to yell at one another. It was my partner who pulled me away, got me in the car, and drove us home while attempting to reassure me the whole time. That conflict might have lasted much longer if he hadn't been beside me, so I was glad to have him by my side because I was pretty worked up. I completely stopped talking to my sister after this episode. Although we had battled previously, it had never been this vicious. For me, it was the final straw. Since I was already living apart from her, I must admit that I no longer felt compelled to think of her as a member of my family. My parents called me the day following the event to inform me that they had reprimanded my sister. They hoped we could work things out in the end, even if she wasn't prepared to apologize. I informed them that I had no interest in resolving the matter. I didn't want anything to do with her anymore, therefore I wanted our relationship to stay awful. They attempted to convince me otherwise, but I reminded them they shared some of the responsibility. They had never recognized our fierce sibling rivalry since we were little and had even fostered it. They therefore couldn't be shocked that we didn't want to be together. We got into a fight because they didn't agree with me. They apologized over the phone a few days later and acknowledged their error. It seemed a little meaningless at the moment, but I've forgiven them. Even though I had already made the decision not to talk to my sister, I didn't want to sever my ties with my parents. It's been 6 years since that happened, and I haven't spoken to my sister since. But as long as they don't pressure me to make amends, I don't mind that my parents and she have a typical relationship. We seldom talk, but I have seen her at family gatherings. We avoid each other, even on holidays, and I like it that way. We don't get along, and everyone in the family knows it, but no one understands why. They only know that we got into a fight, and I haven't changed anything because neither of us looked good after it. I kept it a secret from my family for over 6 years, but during my bridal shower, I finally revealed the truth. In addition to my bridesmaids, my maid of honor had only invited close relatives and friends. Since we weren't adhering to the custom of just inviting women, my fiancé was also present. I wanted everyone I cared about to be there. Nevertheless, my parents chose to invite my estranged sister as well for whatever reason. Sincerely, I have no idea what they were thinking, but I was taken aback when they entered with her. I was surprised to discover that my sister appeared just as surprised to see me. When they walked in, the room became quiet, and there seemed to be a standoff. My parents approached me and spoke to us both after what seemed like a lifetime. They said that a lot had changed in the 6 years following the tragedy. Above all, they expected us to make amends because they thought we were older and more mature. Her face made it obvious that my sister had been duped by her parents to get her there. I informed my parents they had no right to do this on such a significant day for me before she could say anything. I gently requested that they go with my sister. My parents wouldn't leave, so I tried to maintain my dignity so as not to ruin the occasion. They advised me to move on from the past. They gave the impression that nothing important had occurred, as though it would be simple for me to go on, which annoyed me. I reenacted the entire episode to help them remember it, and to make sure everyone else knew exactly what had happened 6 years prior. I then inquired if anyone in the room felt that I could simply let go of this. If I had married someone else, it would have been a different story, but I was marrying the same man with whom my sister had openly flirted when I first brought him home to meet the family. She had shamelessly done it in front of me, treating him as though he were a participant in a tournament that he had never consented to. Above all, she attacked me first after doing all of that, simply because I called her out on her actions and labeled her a loser. I had never had someone attempting to physically harm me in that way before, so it was traumatic for me. Despite everything, she acted as if nothing had happened and never apologized to me in the previous 6 years. I didn't feel obligated to forgive her or move on from the past. I never allowed someone like her back into my life because I felt it was more vital to cling to the past. My parents' assumption that they could simply bring her to my bridal shower and expect us to comply was absurd. Fortunately, my sister realized her mistake and left before my parents could dispute much further. My mother followed her, presumably to appease her, as I assume she wasn't pleased about being misled either. My father stayed with me for a short while, but I informed him that since he had disappointed me, I didn't want to talk to him just now. He became irritated and accused me of being irrational, claiming that I was acting like a brat and that it made no sense to hold on to something that had happened 6 years prior. Although I didn't think I was being a brat, I told him to go since I didn't want to argue with him. He also left after a few minutes. After that, I was so overwhelmed that I had to take a few minutes off to gather myself. Fortunately, my fiancé and maid of honor supported me, and after a little while, I was back to my usual self. Everyone else cooperated, seeing that I needed a diversion and didn't want to think about my sister or dad, and we resumed the celebration as if nothing had happened. After the encounter, my fiancé and I went home, and we didn't discuss the situation further. I was okay with the fact that I hadn't heard from my parents since this incident, which occurred roughly 5 days ago. I felt that we should spend some time apart after what they did. Although I didn't anticipate hearing from them right away, they did, and not to offer an apology, but rather to hold me responsible for my sister's predicament. My mother called me this morning on the phone. As soon as I responded, she instructed me to contact my aunt and ensure that she offered my sister the position she had been discussing. I urged my mother to back up since she seemed agitated and panicked, and I didn't know what she was talking about. She went on to explain that my sister had been out of work for roughly 6 months due to layoffs and downsizing at her prior employer. She had to move back in with our parents a few weeks ago after realizing she could no longer afford the rent. She had been searching for a job, but she had not been able to locate one that she liked or that paid enough. My mother had discussed this with my aunt, who was launching a new company. Because my sister had been working in marketing before, my aunt had first chosen to appoint her as head of marketing. However, my aunt stopped replying and eventually revoked the invitation following the bridal shower episode, in which I told her what had transpired 6 years prior. Since I had always been my aunt's favorite, I didn't find it unexpected, and I believed it to be a plausible explanation when my mother forwarded the message my aunt had sent her to me. My aunt stated in her reply that it was evident my sister had severe anger management problems based on her understanding of the incident I described. My aunt wasn't pleased that she hadn't even offered an apology, not even during the bridal shower. Furthermore, my aunt stated that she had first chosen to hire my sister because she was related, but that she had interviewed a better competent applicant for the job a few weeks prior. She would now offer the position to the more competent applicant since she had changed her mind. That seemed totally reasonable to me, and I was genuinely glad my aunt had a change of heart. I informed my mother that I couldn't do anything about it after reading her message because, as someone who has seen the negative effects of nepotism in the job, I didn't want my aunt to be the type of person who makes things worse. Otherwise, my sister would have been employed because of nepotism. The real reason my sister wasn't hired was that it appeared my aunt had discovered someone more suited for the position. Since this was my aunt's business life and I didn't want to cross any lines, I informed her I wouldn't talk to her. In an attempt to destroy my sister's reputation and image in front of the family, my mother began to lose her head and began screaming at me. Since I hadn't discussed the issue in years, she suggested I didn't need to bring it up during my bridal shower. Even though I had started the argument by calling my sister a loser, especially knowing it would hit her where it hurt, she thought I purposefully painted her as unstable and nasty in order to garner the family's sympathy and make myself appear to be the nice guy. For the record, I wasn't hiding anything when I recounted the incident. I had stated that I had labeled her a loser before to her attack. Even yet, I don't believe that calling her derogatory names excused her physical altercation. It was just unjust for my mother to say that I brought up the incident in order to harm my sister's reputation. I blocked my parents and hung up. After giving it some thought, I'm not sure if discussing the incident was a wise decision. My mother said over the phone that I hadn't given my sister a chance, despite the fact that she had evolved over the years. That was pretty rude of me, she said. I brought up my sister's attack on me 6 years ago, which resulted in her losing a job offer. Am I correct in bringing this up? Update 1. Hi, Reddit. Before I discuss the events that followed my initial post, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who took the time to leave a remark. I appreciate your nice words and suggestions very much. Well, let's talk about what transpired after I blocked my parents. My parents were unable to reach me because my sister had been barred for the previous 6 years. They chose to come see me as they had no other method to get in touch with me. I truly don't have time to handle all of this because I'm getting married in a few weeks. I already have a lot on my plate. Since I had just returned from work and my fiancé and I needed to travel right away for a last-minute wedding dress fitting, I told them to leave when they arrived. We were going to go, but they had arrived at the wrong time, and I knew that if we opened the door, they would find a way to continue chatting and irritate me. They didn't go even after I threatened to contact the police. To be honest, I didn't want to call the police since I thought it would be excessive. Being the type of person who phones the police for everything was not something I wanted to be. We agreed to let them in, give them a cursory hearing, and then leave after speaking with my fiancé. After making up our minds, we invited them inside, opened the door, and ordered them to hurry up because we had other places to be. Fortunately, my folks didn't mince words. They said that my aunt had withdrawn her offer to hire my sister due to my actions at my bridal shower. They insisted that I talk to my aunt and make sure my sister found employment because, in theory, I was at fault. I didn't want to repeat myself because it was the same argument. I informed them that I couldn't do anything about it because I had already spoken to my mother about it over the phone. They knew I was busy and I'm getting married in a few weeks, so it seemed senseless to come to my place and discuss it again. My sister then cut me off. They came for other reasons, she claimed, besides the job offer. I was taken aback by that as it was our first conversation in 6 years. She went on to tell me that it was really because of her that they were there. She felt compelled to apologize to me. Since I'm still unsure of how I felt at the time, I genuinely don't know what to say to you all. Since I plainly don't trust her, I had serious doubts about her intentions. I chose to be direct with her as a result. I questioned if she truly wanted to apologize or if she was just there to do so because she believed I could help her land the job. I informed her that I couldn't help her, therefore there was no use in wasting her breath if it was only about the job. She appeared a little taken aback by my candor, but she was able to explain that she had come to apologize and that our parents were there to discuss the job. It was obvious they hadn't talked about this because even my parents appeared astonished when I looked at them. My sister, though, seemed unconcerned. She said that she was merely there to apologize and had no interest in the position. Over the previous 6 years, she had given her actions against me a lot of thought, but she had always found a reason not to say sorry. However, she was unable to deny the reality that she had mistreated me after the bridal shower. My fiancé and I were still having a hard time processing everything, but I could tell she was serious based on her tone and conduct. She informed me that she had been resentful of me since she was a child because she felt like she had to compete with me. Since nothing mattered in the real world, she understood that she had wasted her entire youth and adolescence competing with me. She felt bad about it because we could have been friends, especially because I had made multiple attempts to be her buddy. She acknowledged that she had pushed me away because she always thought of me as a rival. I had felt the same way, so hearing her utter all of it was crazy. I'm embarrassed to say that as she related her story, I began to cry. After that, she spoke to my fiancé and expressed regret for the way she had treated him during their one and only encounter. She acknowledged that the apology was long overdue and that she had been so preoccupied with defeating me that she had failed to recognize the type of person she had become. She didn't wait for our response once she was done. She merely stated that we didn't have to pardon her. She only wanted to let it out, and now that she had, she would stop bothering us. My parents, my fiancé and I were the only people left in the room when she left. Since none of us had anticipated it, we were all sitting in awe, trying to comprehend what had just transpired. My fiancé and I went out for my fitting after my parents eventually left without a word. We didn't talk about any of it until we got home. We only began discussing my sister's remarks approximately 30 minutes ago. Even though it took her 6 years, I felt that her apology was extraordinarily mature. She meant every word, based on her actions. My fiancé and I are currently debating whether or not to forgive her. Since we haven't even finished processing it, it's too soon to tell. We're tempted to get in touch with her later and express our forgiveness. I need more time before I can reassure her that everything is fine, even though I've already unblocked her. Even though it took her many years to realize we could have been friends, that is something I'm truly happy about. Update 2. Hello. I just realized that in my previous update, I neglected to express what I intended to do with relation to my parents. To be honest, I forgot about it because I was so preoccupied with my sister's predicament. In any case, my folks haven't gotten in touch with us since our previous visit a few days ago. We're going to keep avoiding them because I don't think they're sorry for anything. The way my sister and I ended up together is one of the many things I hold my parents responsible for. They still had the opportunity to be better parents, but they blew it. They have consistently made it all but impossible for me to maintain them in my life, despite my best efforts. We've fought and argued a lot over the last 6 years, and I've always tried to forgive them, but I'm at a loss now. People who obviously don't care about my feelings, or even my sister's, if I'm being honest, can't continue to be excused. In the end, we won't communicate with them, and I doubt they'll come to my wedding. However, my fiancé and I want to get in touch with them in a few days to inform them that they are no longer invited at the wedding, just to be safe. Update 3. Hello everyone. Last week I got married. Everything was lovely and fantastic, exactly as I had envisioned, and I had a great time. My parents were not present, as was to be expected. My spouse and I didn't even have to make contact with them. They informed me via email that there had been a huge mistake and that they would not be attending. They said my sister and I had begun to demonize them and that they didn't need to be reminded that we blamed them for the tense relationship. They said that, despite their best efforts to be excellent parents to us, they now intend to take some time off and live their separate lives without worrying about their daughters because we don't value their presence in our lives. I mean, if that's what they want, I'm okay with it. Happier news. A few days after I published my most recent update, I contacted my sister. I told her that I would love for her to attend my wedding and that I accepted her apology. It was a very joyful day, and she kindly accepted my invitation and attended the wedding. It's absurd to think that I would have sneered at my parents a few months ago if they had informed me that my sister would attend my wedding instead of them. But now we are here. In any case, I'm glad everything went without a hitch and that I'm at last getting back on track with my sister. This is sufficient for me for the time being, but perhaps my parents will change their minds and apologize to us. Life has never been better, and my husband and I will soon be departing for our honeymoon.